Chapter 2040. Jianqin, Kea, Chanlong, and Yunqin hovered in the air. Below them was a sea of fire completely composed of magma. The flames were extremely fierce, reaching several dozen meters into the air. From afar, it was an extremely magnificent sight. The ferocious and overbearing flames seemed to have become the only thing in this world. As they blossomed with their own dazzling brilliance, they also hid an extremely terrifying danger. Jianshan gazed over and discovered a few black rocks of various sizes floating in the sea of fire. The smallest ones were only several meters wide, while the largest ones were over 1,000 meters wide. At a closer glance, they would discover that the black rocks all floated in the magma that spewed out terrifying flames. They were like islands in the sea. They were just so eye-catching. Jianshan took out a medium-quality saint artifact from his space ring and directly tossed it into the magma below. As soon as the medium-quality saint artifact entered the magma, it immediately became bright red before melting at a visible rate. In just a few seconds, the medium-quality saint artifact had been reduced to a pool of liquid, fusing with the magma. Jianshan's eyes narrowed at the sight of this. He knew extremely well just how tough medium-quality saint artifacts were. Yet, such a tough medium-quality saint artifact was actually unable to endure the heat of the magma. The terror of the magma had completely exceeded his expectations. The black rocks floating in the magma seemed to be perlite or... At this moment, Master Chanlong cried out. He stared at the black rocks of various sizes as shock filled his face. Perlite ore? What's that? Jianshan, Kea, and Yunqin all became confused as they stared at the black rocks. Master Chanlong sucked in a deep breath and said slowly, I've only seen records of perlite ore in an ancient book. I can't confirm whether the black rocks are perlite ore or not. Let me take a closer look. Master Chanlong immediately flew towards the closest black rock. In the end, he stopped several hundred meters above a black rock that was several meters wide. The power of the Divine King's cultivation formed a barrier around him, resisting the terrifying heat. The terrifying heat from the magma made it difficult for Master Chanlong to continue descending. Moreover, when he approached the black rock, he could feel that the heat from the black rock was several times more intense than the magma. Suddenly, Master Chanlong's body trembled violently. At this moment, even with his mental fortitude, he found it difficult to remain calm. He sucked in a deep breath and said with some excitement, That's right. It's exactly the same as recorded in the ancient book. These black rocks are all perlite Oregon. That's a high-grade god-tier material. Even if it's only the size of a fist, its value is unimaginable. However, there's actually so much perlite ore here. Hearing that, Jianshan finally understood what the perlite ore was. It was actually a high-grade god-tier material. God-tier materials were divided into 4 major grades: low-grade, mid-grade, high-grade, and supreme grade. Among them, the 4 major grades of low-grade, mid-grade, and high-grade were further divided into 9 subgrades, namely 3, 6, and 9 subgrades. Grades 1 to 3 were low-grade, 4 to 6 were mid-grade, and 7 to 9 were high-grade. Jianshan could not help but gasp when he saw the black rocks floating in the magma. If all the black rocks were perlite ore, he struggled to imagine just how great of a fortune the perlite ore here was. Jianshan descended from the sky. He wanted to land on a piece of perlite ore to study it carefully. However, when he was 50 meters away from the perlite ore, he was forced to stop. The perlite ore was extremely hot. Origin energy would vaporize in its vicinity. It was definitely more terrifying than the magma in the surroundings. Even with Jianshan's chaotic body, he could only get 50 meters away from the perlite Oregon. If he went any further, even his chaotic body would not be able to withstand it. Probably even late Divine King can't approach the perlite ore. Jianshan was secretly surprised. At the same time, he felt extremely regretful. No one would be in a good mood if they returned empty-handed from a mountain of treasure. Suddenly, Jianshan's eyes narrowed. He extended a finger, and a strand of sword chi immediately shot out. It struck the pernight or below and produced a heavy sound. Under the ripples of energy, a red crystal on the pernight or was blown into the air. Jianqin caught the red crystal. It was the size of an egg and irregular in shape. It was warm to the touch and hid extremely pure, fire-attributed energy. Aside from the pure fire-attributed energy, Jianqin could also sense the presence of the laws of fire from the crystal. Yun Xan said when she saw the red crystal in Jianqin's hand, "This is a fire divine crystal." According to the people who left the Poseidon Palace in the past, fire divine crystals can only be obtained on the 8th floor of the palace. Because the divine fire crystal contains the divine fire laws. To martial artists who comprehend the divine fire laws, the divine fire crystal is a supreme treasure for cultivation. Not only is the fire-attributed energy in the fire divine crystal even purer than supreme-grade divine crystals, but more importantly, regular contact with the laws of fire in the fire divine crystal can assist in comprehending the laws of fire. Yun Xan glanced at Jianqin and continued, "Fire divine crystals are extremely valuable. If you take them to the saint's world, they'll be worth 10 times more than supreme-grade divine crystals at the very least." Jianqin's eyes lit up. He said, "If I cut the fire divine crystal in my hand according to the size of a divine crystal, I'll be able to cut it into 20 or 30 pieces. In other words, if I exchange it for supreme grade divine crystals, I'll be able to get 200 or 300 pieces. If I have enough fire divine crystals," Jianqin looked at the chain of volcanoes nearby and said, "It's impossible for fire divine crystals to appear on the pernight or for no reason. It looks like it came from the volcanoes. There should be a lot of fire divine crystals at the bottom of the volcanoes." That's right. There are indeed a lot of fire divine crystals at the bottom of the volcanoes. This has already been verified by many people who have ventured out from here. This is because every time the volcanoes erupt, many fire divine crystals will be expelled. Most of the fire divine crystals will fall into the lava, and only a tiny portion of them will land on the black rock, which will then be picked up by people. It's just a pity that the flames here are no ordinary flames, so no one can approach the volcanoes whenever they erupt. Once they come into contact with the flames, even the divine king might die in the late stages, let alone reaching the bottom of the volcanoes. As a result, fire divine crystals aren't easy to obtain here, Yun Xan said with some regret. Yun Xan said with some pity. There was no longer any arrogance on her face right now. At this moment, the fire elemental energy in the surroundings suddenly surged. The entire world seemed to tremble. 10,000 kilometers away from Jianqin's group, a volcano erupted, shooting flames into the sky. The Poseidon Palace was only a few 100,000 meters wide from the outside, but the space inside had been transformed into miniature worlds by the past experts, making it extremely vast. As a result, the internal space of the Poseidon Palace could not be measured by the size of the Divine Palace from the outside. For example, the space on the 8th floor was far larger than 1,000,000 kilometers. Chapter 2041. When Jianqin's group approached the place, the volcanoes there had already erupted. Several connected volcanoes shot out a huge streak of red light from boiling lava at the same time, piercing into the sky. These volcanoes were not like those in the natural world. Instead, they had been personally modified by the primordial realm experts of the Taoist sect of Neptunia. As a result, the eruption of these volcanoes could not be compared to those in the natural world. Looking from afar, the fiery red lava spewing out from these volcanoes really pierced into the clouds, merging with the red clouds high up in the sky. It actually gave people a feeling that it was connected to the heavens and earth, which was extremely spectacular. Jianqin and the others all stayed far away. These volcanoes were extraordinary. When they erupted, they would spew out boiling lava, which made them extremely fearful. They could clearly sense that the lava actually possessed strands of the power of the laws of fire. It could pose a fatal threat to the Divine King. Furthermore, in this region, other than the few of them, there were quite a few people floating in the surrounding sky. They were all surrounding the erupting volcano and hiding far away from it. These people varied in cultivation. There were overgods and Divine King. However, at this moment, all of them raised their heads to look at the sky. They stared at the lava that shot into the clouds without blinking at all. Finally, the lava spewed out from the volcano crater fell from the clouds, burning with flames. It turned into a rain of magma with a terrifying temperature, sprinkling in all directions and falling from the sky. When this rain of lava fell, the origin energy of this space seemed to be burning. Just a light breath would make one feel as if their internal organs were burning. The magma rain continued to spread in all directions as it fell, covering a radius of several hundred meters, causing all the warriors in this area to retreat as fast as they could. At this moment, a gleam of light flashed through Genshin's eyes. He discovered quite a few fire divine crystals in the rain of lava. They varied in size. The smaller ones were only the size of a fingernail, while the larger ones were the size of a person's head. It was also at this moment that the cultivators in the surroundings all took action. They all pulled out chain-like or rope-like saint artifacts. With a thought, all the chain-like and rope-like saint artifacts extended endlessly. They began to collect the fire divine crystals from very far away. Even the weakest saint artifact was a high-quality saint artifact. There were even quite a few supreme-quality saint artifacts. As a result, even though the lava was extremely terrifying and could easily melt medium-quality saint artifacts, it would not cause any damage to high-quality saint artifacts, even if they accidentally came in contact with them. Moreover, all the cultivators did their best to prevent their saint artifacts from coming in contact with the lava as they collected the fire divine crystals. As a result, the awkward situation of their saint artifacts melting would not occur as they collected the fire divine crystals. Very soon, the rain of lava fell. It either fused with the sea of lava below, or dripped onto the perlite or that floated in the lava, gradually disappearing. The temperature of the perlite or shur is terrifying. The reason why the lava has disappeared is not because it has fused with the perlite organ. Instead, it has been vaporized by the terrifying temperature of the perlite ore and reduced to nothingness. Genshin sighed in amazement. There were a few small fire divine crystals scattered on the perlite ore as well. Most of the fire divine crystals that no one had collected had fallen into the sea of lava. Haha, we've gotten quite the harvest this time. If we convert it into supreme quality divine crystals, we'll have around half a cube. I'm rather lucky this time. I actually obtained 2 fire divine crystals the size of a person's head. In the distance, many cultivators who collected the fire divine crystals grinned from ear to ear. They all flaunted their harvests and were satisfied. However, not everyone was like that. At the same time, there were many people who had failed to collect anything and were dejected. Let's go to the next place. The volcanoes, several tens of thousand kilometers away, seemed to be about to erupt as well. Very soon, everyone dispersed. There were many people who remained on the 8th floor. Many of the Divine King knew their limits. They knew that the fortunes above were not something they could partake in. As a result, they remained on the 8th floor, waiting for the volcanoes to erupt so that they could collect the fire divine crystals. The 8th floor was extremely large. The volcanoes were densely packed together, one after another. The volcanoes would often erupt with many fire divine crystals. As a result, whenever the Azure Poseidon Palace opened, many people would remain on the 8th floor for a full decade before leaving with a large number of fire divine crystals. Genshin did not collect the fire divine crystals. Instead, he stared at the churning sea of lava below him quietly. He frowned slightly as the light in his eyes flickered with uncertainty. Yun Xian seemed to understand what Genshin was thinking when she saw Genshin like this. She could not help but curl her lips and say, The fire divine crystals at the bottom of the lava have probably formed a thick layer over time, but it's best if you don't try it. According to the rumors in the outside world, no one has ever ventured down there. Even the experts on the God King's throne avoid the magma. I have also heard that even some weaker infinite primes are unable to enter the lava. Jianqin did not become dejected. He said calmly, "With my current strength, I'm indeed unable to approach the lava. If my strength increases, the outcome might be different. Let's go." Jianqin's group of 4 continued onwards. After roughly looking around the 8th floor, they made their way to the 9th floor without any reluctance. He felt like the 8th floor was specially used to nurture the Pernite Oregon. There were no legacies left behind at all. However, he clearly did not have enough strength right now to try and obtain the Pernite Oregon. Let alone touching it, he could not even approach it. As for the fire divine crystals, the tiny amount that emerged from the volcano was not tempting to him at all because there was just too little of it. If he collected them at this rate, he might not be able to gather enough for a single interplanar teleportation formation, even if he collected them for 10 years. What truly attracted him were the fire divine crystals at the bottom of the lava. The matter at hand right now is for my comprehension of the laws of the sword to break through as soon as possible. Only by reaching the major achievement of sword spirit can my chaotic body advance to the next level. Once I reach the 12th layer of the chaotic body, I should be able to last for a while, even if I can't endure the terrifying heat of the lava. Then, using the defenses of the Inata Tower, it won't be impossible for me to collect the fire divine crystals at the bottom of the lava, Jianqin thought. P.S. On the 1st of January, 2017, Xiaoyao has prepared a red packet for everyone. At that time, Xiaoyao will announce the password for the red packet. Although there aren't many red packets, they can be used as a form of entertainment. However, due to the fact that the Chaos Sword God's update time is not fixed on the various platforms, some platforms might even be delayed by a day. As a result, in order for everyone to receive the password for the red packet as soon as possible, Xiaoyao will announce the password for the red packet through Community Prestige. Please pay attention to it if you have not received Xiaoyao's Community Prestige. It will only take a minute. Xiaoyao's Community Prestige signal, Xingxingxiaoyo 110-inch Xinxing Xiaoyao, was the full pinyin of his pen name and the number 110. Chapter 2042. The path from the 1st floor to the 12th floor was no longer a secret in the saint's world. After all, the palace had been opened far too many times, so there were naturally many people who had entered the 12th floor in the past. As a result, even if some organizations wanted to seal up the situation within the palace, they were unable to do so. Although Jianqin and the others did not have a complete understanding of the situation in the Neptunian Divine Palace, as a matter of fact, they did learn the precise path from the 1st floor to the 12th from Yun Lianqing. As a result, Jianqin's group found the entrance to the 9th floor with great ease and entered the 9th floor of the palace. The 9th floor of the palace was no longer a place that regular disciples could reach. In the past, when the Taoist sect of Neptunia was still around, all those who had the right to enter the 9th floor were people of great authority. None of them were weak. As a result, both the environment and the scenery on the 9th floor were extremely beautiful and magnificent. As far as the eye could see, the ground was an endless Aoyama River. The water was glossy and the sky was blue. Pure and surging origin energy permeated every inch of space, far surpassing any sacred grounds that Jianqin had seen before. In particular, a huge sun hung high in the sky. It was dazzling and gave off rings of rainbow light, making it difficult for people to look at it directly. Is that a god artifact? Jianqin looked at the sun in the sky as soon as possible, and his heart immediately shuddered. He had seen god artifacts before, and it was not just one. Whether it was the damaged armor or the Inata Tower, they were both god artifacts. However, all god artifacts possessed an extremely special presence and pulse. They were far more powerful than supreme quality saint artifacts. At this moment, he also sensed the special pulse of a god artifact from the sun in the sky. That's right, it really is a god artifact. What extravagance! Actually using a god artifact as a sun. Chanlong squinted his eyes as he stared at the sun in the sky. He sighed emotionally. God artifacts were absolute treasures in the saints' world. They were extremely rare. This was because many infinite primes in the saints' world did not possess god artifacts. The treasures they used were still supreme quality, saint artifacts. The appearance of a god artifact, even if it was a god artifact of the lowest quality, was enough for many infinite primes to fight to the death. This was more than enough to demonstrate the value of god artifacts. This should be the first time you've come to the Azure Poseidon Palace, right? At this moment, a voice rang out from nearby. A middle-aged man walked over with a friendly smile as he clasped his fist towards Genshin's group. They had sensed the middle-aged man's existence long ago. When they entered the 9th floor, the middle-aged man just happened to come up from the 8th floor as well. Genshin's people's attention, the primordial realm expert of course, and all, of course, the Divine King. Greetings, fellow Taoists. I am Xiaozhang. The middle-aged man clasped his fist at Genshin's group before looking at the scorching sun in the sky. He said, "It looks like you don't understand the situation in the Poseidon Palace very well. The scorching sun is indeed a god artifact, but in the Azure Poseidon Palace, every floor from the 8th floor onwards is a world. The space on each floor is so large that the floors below cannot compare to it. After the experts of the Taoist sect of Neptunia created such a huge world, they naturally had to maintain the stability of the world so that the 5 elements were present. The scorching sun is connected to the separation of yin and yang, so it's obviously essential. As a result, starting from the 9th floor onwards, the experts of the Taoist sect of Neptunia would use a god artifact to create a scorching sun on each floor, separating the yin and yang of the world. Of course, apart from the scorching sun, there's also the bright moon. However, the bright moon only exists in legends. No one who has entered the Azure Poseidon Palace has seen it. Why is that? Is there something special about the bright moon? Or has it been taken away by someone?" Yun Xian asked curiously. She had never heard of this before. Xiao Zheng chuckled when he heard that. Taken away? The god artifacts used to stabilize the yin and yang of the world in the Poseidon Palace can't be taken away so easily. Moreover, it's impossible for primordial realm experts to enter the Neptunian divine palace. As mere god kings, even if they rank first on the god king's throne, it's impossible for them to take away god artifacts like that. That's because it's rumored in the saints' world that the god artifacts were personally cast down by the ancestors of the Taoist sect of Neptunia. Xiao Zheng immediately became filled with respect when he mentioned the ancestors. He said sternly, "The ancestors of the Taoist sect of Neptunia are grand primes. They're existences that stand at the apex. Even chaotic primes can't take away the things they cast down, let alone the Divine King." It's said that the reason why the bright moon has vanished is related to the calamity that the Taoist sect of Neptunia faced over 3 million years ago. It's as if the moon vanished after the sect was destroyed. Xiao Zheng paused when he reached there. There's another rumor in the saints' world. It's said that the sun and moon in the Azure Poseidon Palace are not as simple as they seem on the surface. There's an even deeper secret hidden within. When the sun disappears and the moon rises up again, the Azure Poseidon Palace will undergo a great change. A great change. This time, it was not just Jinshin. Even Jianqin, Chanlong, and Kei showed interest. Xiao Zheng nodded sternly, indeed. It's rumored that it came from a supreme expert of the saints' world. But for some reason, it was leaked out and spread further and further in the saints' world. As a result, many people know about it now. However, no one knows what this great change represents, whether it's a blessing or a curse. This is because, apart from those experts who can peer into the heavenly secrets, no one else has the right to come into contact with these secrets. Xiao Zheng suddenly smiled freely when he reached there. He said, "Who cares if the Azure Poseidon Palace will undergo a great change? It's not like it has anything to do with us. Even if the sky collapses, there will be those great experts who will hold it up." "Oh, right. I can see that you don't seem to be very familiar with the Azure Poseidon Palace. The 9th floor is so large, so not only will it be a waste of time if we search inch by inch, but it'll also be very difficult to discover anything. Even if we're lucky enough to find a dwelling left behind by a primordial realm expert, you have to know that the Azure Poseidon Palace has been opened so many times that it's no longer a secret to many large organizations. As a result, there will definitely be many divine kings trying to break through the formations outside the dwelling. There might even be supreme divine kings who sit on the divine king's throne. It'll indeed be very difficult for us to get a share of the loot with our strength. I just happen to know that there's a divine medicinal garden on the 9th floor. It's planted with a large number of god-tier heavenly resources, and there are even quite a few flowers of ways. Flowers of ways are divine items that have been imprinted with the laws of the world. If a divine king consumes them at their peak, they can increase their chances of breaking through to the primordial realm. Even to primordial realm experts, it has certain effects, so it's extremely valuable. I wonder if you're interested." Xiao Zheng stared at Genshin's group of four eagerly, but most of his attention was on Master Qianlong. Since there are so many god-tier heavenly resources in the divine medicinal garden, there must be quite a few people fighting over them. Genshin looked at Xiao Zheng. Chapter 2043. "Xiao Zheng, you wouldn't tell us all this for no reason, right? Tell us your conditions." Genshin said. Xiao Zheng had approached them of his own accord as soon as he had appeared. He was extremely enthusiastic and proactive, so he probably had other intentions. Xiao Zheng was stunned when he heard Genshin's words. He laughed involuntarily and said, "You're mistaken. I just saw how little you know about the situation in Poseidon Palace, which is why I shared some of the information I know with you. I hope it'll be of some help to you. The information I've just shared isn't actually a secret. I believe most of the people who have entered Poseidon Palace know a little about it. Why would I use such worthless information to negotiate with you? Although I'm not exactly a straightforward person, I'm not that shameless," Xiao Zheng said seriously. Xiao Zheng said solemnly. His expression faintly carried a sense of majesty, and there was also a sense of righteousness surrounding him. Genshin stared at Xiao Zheng calmly. The presence Xiao Zheng gave off made him think of the divine king of the divine kingdom of Pingtian. Xiao Zheng's current presence was extremely similar to the divine king's. It was the presence of a ruler. As for the aura of an emperor, normally speaking, only those who ruled over a region, held a high position, and were crowned as emperors would possess such an aura. At this moment, Xiao Zheng paused before clasping his hands at Genshin and the others. He said, "Of course, if you don't mind, I can be your guide. Although I don't know everything about Poseidon Palace, I do know most of it." Genshin's interest was piqued by Xiao Zheng's suggestion. They just happened to lack a guide right now, so they could avoid some detours. As a result, he immediately agreed to Xiao Zheng's suggestion. Afterwards, Xiao Zheng joined Genshin's group successfully. Afterwards, he directly led Genshin's group to the divine medicinal garden. Genshin's group gained some understanding of Xiao Zheng along the way. Xiao Zheng came from the Hinyu Plain, which was not far away from the Tsang, Poseidon Palace. As a matter of fact, they could see the Hinyu Plain clearly from outside the palace. Xiao Zheng did not come from a large sect or clan. Instead, he was the divine king of a divine kingdom. The divine kingdom was basically the same size as the divine kingdom of Pingtian, but due to the fact that the divine kingdom was located in an extremely remote location, it lacked resources. As a result, Xiao Zheng was the only divine king in the vast kingdom. Xiao Zheng had entered the Tsang Poseidon Palace several times as well. Each time, he would pay a certain price to purchase a spot from other organizations. The ninth floor was just too large. Even with Jianchen's group speed, they still took an entire day to arrive at the divine medicinal garden Xiaozheng had mentioned. The divine medicinal garden was located in a valley. It was surrounded by mountains, and there was only a narrow, winding path that served as its entrance. What dense origin energy! This valley is actually where all the spiritual veins on the ninth floor converge. All the spiritual veins on the ninth floor nourish this valley. Jianchen could not help but sigh in amazement as he stood outside the valley. Even if an immortal tier heavenly resource was planted here, it would become a god tier heavenly resource in an extremely short amount of time and become a god tier heavenly resource. Jianchen's group flew into the valley along the narrow path. Aside from Xiaozheng, all of them were stunned by what they saw as soon as they entered the valley. They stared at the scene with their mouths agape as shock filled their faces. A large swathe of heavenly resources had been planted in the huge valley. Whether it was the ground, the mountains, or the cliffs, they were everywhere. There were so many of them that it was unimaginable. Without any exception, all of the heavenly resources had reached the god tier. They were extremely valuable. Even though some of the heavenly resources were originally at the immortal tier, they had all reached the god tier after a long period of accumulation and growth in the unique environment of the valley. The only regret was that these god tier heavenly treasures were all protected by a powerful formation. It was extremely difficult to obtain them. Over 1,000 people had gathered in the divine medicinal garden. They were trying to get through the formation that protected the heavenly resources. Booms constantly rang out. Heavens, there are actually so many god tier heavenly resources here. I've never even heard of such a huge pile of god tier heavenly resources gathered in one place. Yunqin sighed in amazement. Her eyes burned with desire. No one would be able to remain calm if they saw so many god tier heavenly resources all at once. Flowers of ways. There are actually over a dozen of them here. Jianchen slowly glanced over as he sighed in amazement. In the past, Fairy Haoyue had killed 9 divine king realm experts who guarded the Yin Mountains of Seven's despair for a single flower of ways. She had even offended the 9th prince of the Blood Sun Empire because of that. However, there were actually over a dozen flowers of ways here. From their grades, they seemed to be much more valuable than the one Fairy Haoyue had obtained before. It really was worthy of being called the Divine Medicinal Garden. There are many heavenly resources here, but only around a dozen of them are taken away from the palace of the Blue Poseidon whenever it opens. Xiaozheng sighed gently. Let me get through the formation. Master Chanlong's eyes had turned red as well. His breathing had become rather heavy. Clearly, he struggled to remain calm as well. He immediately arrived before the nearest god tier heavenly resource and began to study the formation. He was prepared to get through it. At this moment, a middle-aged man in tattered clothes and covered in blood rushed into the garden in a panic, fleeing for his life. When he discovered what was happening in the divine medicinal garden, he came to a halt. After being slightly stunned, his face immediately changed drastically. He wanted to turn around and flee. The only entrance to the divine medicinal garden was through the narrow path. The surrounding mountains were all covered in formations, so it was impossible to leap over them. Clearly, the middle-aged man was fleeing from his enemies. Entering the dead end that was the divine medicinal garden was basically a dead end for him. Naturally, the middle-aged man's arrival attracted the attention of some people nearby. Many people looked at him in an odd manner. Yun Xian discovered him as well. However, when Yun Xian saw the middle-aged man covered in blood, her face immediately changed. She subconsciously called out, "Uncle Lai." The middle-aged man immediately shuddered when he heard this. He stopped instinctively and looked back at Yun Xian. He was extremely shocked. Jianchen and Kea recognized the middle-aged man as well. They were surprised. They had seen the middle-aged man before. He was one of the 16 divine kings of the Yun family. He was called Yun Daolai. Yun Daolai's shock only lasted for a short moment. When he saw Yun Xian, he immediately turned around and arrived before Yun Xian in a flash. He shoved a space ring into Yun Xian's hand without leaving a trace and said secretly, "Take this ring and leave immediately. Get out." Chapter 2044. Yun Xian opened her mouth as she watched Yun Daolai fly away. She wanted to say something, but she stopped herself. Afterwards, she glanced at the space ring in her hand carefully and clenched it tightly, as if she was afraid of being discovered by someone unrelated to her. Yun Daolai was covered in wounds and covered in blood. He was extremely heavily injured. Yet he still wanted to protect the space ring despite being so heavily injured. It went without saying how important the space ring was. Jianqin and Kea naturally sensed Yun Daolai's actions, which made their faces change slightly. Yun Daolai believed that he had done it extremely well, but unfortunately, perhaps because he was in a hurry to escape, he was in far too much of a hurry. Obviously, he would attract the attention of a few people in the surroundings. As a result, not only did Jianqin and Kea sense his actions when he passed the space ring to Yun Xian, but even some of the divine kings who were trying to collect the heavenly resources in the garden sensed Yun Daolai's actions as well. This was because Yun Daolai was only an early divine king. Many of the divine kings in the garden were more powerful than Yun Daolai, so he obviously could not fool them. Immediately, quite a few people shifted their gazes from the heavenly resources to Yun Xian. Many of their gazes were filled with undisguised greed. Clearly, all of them had realized how valuable the space ring was. At this moment, Master Chanlong had stopped trying to break through the formation. He gathered with Jianqin and Kea Yun Xian. The three of them were extremely stern. The three of them realized that they were in deep trouble. Yun Daolai was already busy with his own matters. Clearly, he had not realized just how much trouble he had caused Yun Xian and Kea Yun Xian. He charged out of the garden as quickly as he could. "I can't let them know that I've given the spiritual root of heavenly Tao to Yunxin. I can't let them know that the spiritual root of heavenly Tao is no longer in my hands. Otherwise, they'll find out where the spiritual root of heavenly Tao is. At that time, not only will the spiritual root of heavenly Tao be lost, but Yunxin will also lose her life. As a result, I need to draw them far away in the shortest amount of time possible so that Yun Xian has some time to leave." Yun Daolai's eyes were filled with madness. The spiritual root of the heavenly way was related to the hope of the Yun family's rise. Even if he had to lose his life, he had to protect the spiritual root of the heavenly way. "Yunxin, you mustn't disappoint me. You must bring the spiritual root of the heavenly Tao out." Yun Daolai prayed in his heart. Now, he could only place his hopes on Yunxin. As for whether Jianqin and the others around Yunxin were reliable or not, Yun Daolai didn't have time to think about it. However, at this moment, a huge streak of sword light shone with resplendent light. It shot over from outside the narrow path. Yun Daolai's face suddenly changed as he came to a halt. His heart sank when he saw the strand of sword chi. He immediately drew a blade and slashed out. Boom! With a boom, Yun Daolai's blade collided with the sword chi. The sword chi collapsed, but Yun Daolai's attack was exhausted as well. However, when the sword chi dispersed, the laws of destruction were exposed. The laws of destruction were hidden within the sword chi. The moment the sword chi collapsed, the laws of destruction shot out like an arrow, piercing Yun Daolai's body with lightning speed. Spurt! Yun Daolai vomited blood as he was sent flying. He was knocked back into the divine medicinal garden. His pale face became even paler. "Uncle Lai!" Yunxin cried out. She wanted to charge over without any regard for her own safety, but Jianqin held her back firmly. There were already a few people slowly approaching Yunxin and the others in the divine medicinal garden, but the sudden development made them all stop. They all turned around and looked at the only entrance to the divine medicinal garden. Jianqin looked over as well. He was stern. Under everyone's gazes, an extremely handsome young man who seemed to be in his 20s slowly made his way into the divine medicinal garden. He wore white training clothes and held a sword in his hand. Behind the young man was an old man in a green robe. The old man's presence was completely concealed. He seemed just like an ordinary old man. He's actually just an overgod. An overgod has managed to heavily injure an early divine king with a single strike. Even if the early divine king is already heavily injured, his battle prowess is still shocking, the laws of the sword and the laws of destruction. This overgod has actually comprehended two laws with the greatest offensive power. How terrifying! This person must be famous on the overgod's plaque, and he must be ranked quite high. Discussions rang out in the divine medicinal garden. Many people whispered to each other secretly as they sighed in amazement. The young man with the sword was emotionless. His gaze was cold as he made his way towards Yun Daolai step by step. He did not move quickly, just like a mortal. However, there was an aura of supremacy emanating from his body, especially the young man's piercingly cold gaze. As he gazed at Yun Daolai, it was like a supreme monarch looking down at an ant, and his cold gaze carried a strand of supreme arrogance. If a divine king behaved like this, it would not be strange at all. However, the young man just happened to be an overgod. Yun Daolai clearly feared the young man very much. As the young man approached him, he retreated as well. His face was ashen. "No one can take away what I want. Hand it over. You can't keep the spiritual root of heavenly ways," the young man said coldly. "What? The spiritual root of heavenly ways? I never thought that someone would actually obtain the spiritual root of heavenly ways. That's a treasure that even primordial realm experts would fight tooth and nail for." Cries immediately rang out in the surroundings. The spiritual root of heavenly ways. It's actually the spiritual root of heavenly ways. Xiao Zheng was stunned as well. He murmured, "It said that the spiritual root of heavenly ways contains the ways of the world. When infinite primes use it, not only can they increase their cultivation by 1 heavenly layer to 3 heavenly layers in an extremely short amount of time, but it can also increase their chances of becoming a chaotic prime. In the legends of the saints' world, basically all the people who ingest the spiritual root of heavenly ways have become chaotic primes. The people who haven't all died along the way. As the divine king of a small divine kingdom on the Hinia plain, Xiao Zheng did not possess great strength and had yet to come into contact with the primordial realm, but he did know quite a lot. Jianqin sighed in amazement when he heard that. A spiritual root of heavenly ways was basically enough to create a chaotic prime. The value of the spiritual root of heavenly ways was truly terrifying. Yun Xian was stunned as well. She thought, "Don't tell me there's a spiritual root of heavenly ways in the space ring Uncle I gave me earlier." Although she thought like that, Yun Xian did not dare to check it. "Mo Cheng, with your talent, you don't need the spiritual root of heavenly ways at all. Why do you have to compete with us?" Yun Daolai roared out in reluctance. In order to obtain the spiritual root of heavenly ways, they had paid a heavy price. 6 of the 16 divine king had died. This was because the spiritual root of heavenly ways was directly linked to the future of their Yun family. They had gone as far as to throw away their lives to obtain it. But now, the appearance of this young man made Yun Daolai despair. He knew that the spiritual root of heavenly ways that the 16 divine king of the Yun family had paid a heavy price for could no longer be taken away. When Yun Daolai called out the young man's name, it immediately led to an uproar in the divine medicinal garden. "What? Mo Cheng? He's Mo Cheng, the supreme overgod, ranked first on the overgod's plaque?" The supreme overgod ranked first on the overgod's plaque, Mo Cheng, has actually entered Poseidon Palace as well. This is news that's enough to shake up the entire Poseidon Palace. Mo Cheng is the undisputed greatest overgod in the saints' world. It's said that Mo Cheng possesses an extremely deep understanding of his legacy. Even with the entire saint's world in perspective, his cultivation method is one of the best. In the current saint's world, is there still anyone who can match up to Mo Chung among the over-gods? Mo Chung is so powerful that he can easily kill early divine kings. What kind of heaven-defying battle prowess is that? There's probably no one who can match up to Mo Chung in the current saint's world. As long as a high-level divine king doesn't appear, no one can stop him. In the divine medicinal garden, the gazes of all the god kings gathered on Mo Chung. There was surprise, envy, and fear. As for the few over-gods present, they all looked at Mo Chung with deep fear and admiration. Mo Chung was a dazzling star among the over-gods, illuminating the universe. His name had already spread across the 49 great plains and 81 great planets of the saint's world. This was because he was the strongest over-god. His name hung high on the over-god's plaque on the 49 great plains and 81 great planets. It was dazzling and eye-catching. P.S. On the 1st of January, 2017, Xiaoyao has prepared a red packet for everyone. When the time comes, Xiaoyao will announce the password for the red packet. Although there won't be a lot of red packets, it can be used as a form of entertainment. However, due to the fact that the Chaotic Sword Gods update time is not fixed on the various platforms, some platforms will even be delayed by a day. As a result, in order for everyone to receive the password for the red packet as soon as possible, Xiaoyao will release the password for the red packet through Gong Zhongwei. Please pay attention to it if you have not received Xiaoyao's Gong Zhongwei message. It will only take a minute. Xiaoyao's Gong Zhongwei message. Xingxing Xiao 110 Xinqing Xiaoyao was the pinyin of his pen name and the number 110. Chapter 2045. Mo Chung turned a deaf ear to the exclamations that came from all around him. Even the various envious and worshipful gazes were ignored by him. His heart was calm and composed, and was as firm as a rock. He was completely unaffected by the outside world. This was not because of his mental fortitude or cultivation. Instead, he had already become accustomed to being the center of attention no matter where he went. Mo Chung stared at Yun Daolai coldly and said coldly, "Although I don't need the spiritual root of heavenly ways, the people around me do." Yun Daolai's face was vicious as he stared at Mo Chung resentfully. He roared out reluctantly, "In order to obtain the spiritual root of heavenly ways, we've paid an extremely heavy price. 6 out of the 16 divine king in the clan have died. Have they died for nothing?" Mo Cheng's face did not change at all. He said coldly, "The strong prey on the weak. This has always been the law of survival in this world. Although you discovered the spiritual root of heavenly ways first, you don't have the strength to protect it at all. As a result, you can only pave the way for others. You might even end up as food. And I'm more powerful than you. Whether I want you to become food or not is up to me." Mo Ching acted like he was above everyone else. He did not take Yun Daolai seriously at all. However, he did indeed possess the right to do so now. With his strength, even if Yun Daolai was at his peak, he would not take him seriously. This was because he, Mo Chung, was the supreme overgod who ranked first on the overgod's plaque. His battle prowess was unrivaled, and there was no overgod who could stand up to him. Considering how you've lost so many people in order to obtain the spiritual root of heavenly ways, I can spare your life if you hand it over. Otherwise die. When he spat out the word die, a dense killing intent immediately radiated from his body. He did not bother to hide it at all. Everyone in the divine medicinal garden had stopped what they were doing long ago. They all watched this quietly. Even though the spiritual root of heavenly ways made them envious, none of them dared to do anything, including the few late divine king. As the person who ranked first on the overgod's plaque, Mo Cheng's background was so great that he was not someone they could provoke. Moreover, even though the green-clothed old man behind Mo Cheng had concealed his aura so that no one in the garden was able to discern his cultivation, the more he did that, the more unfathomable they felt him to be. Ha ha ha! You want the spiritual root of heavenly Tao. Even if I die, I won't give it to you. Yun Dao Lai laughed aloud as determination filled his eyes. A space ring appeared in his hand. He wanted to detonate the space ring with the consciousness he had left in it. Mo Cheng's gaze turned cold. He let out a cold harumph and formed an incantation gesture with his left hand before pointing at Yun Daolai. The finger contained a mysterious and great power. Yun Daolai only felt his body tighten. At that moment, he was actually unable to move at all. He had been trapped by a mysterious power. Even though the imprisonment only lasted for a short moment, Mo Cheng had already arrived before Yun Daolai during that moment. He swung his sword and chopped off Yun Daolai's right arm mercilessly, taking away the space ring. What is this secret technique? A late overgod can actually make an early divine. King paused for a moment. Many divine kings in the divine medicinal garden were secretly shocked. Their gazes towards Mo Cheng were filled with deep fear. Even though it was just a split second, it was enough to turn the situation around. Yun Daolai grunted painfully as he staggered backwards while clutching his severed arm. His face was pale. On the other side, Yunxin's eyes were completely red. She felt like a knife had been twisted in her heart when she saw Mo Cheng cut off Yun Daolai's arm. Yunxin clenched the space ring in her hand tightly. She was conflicted inside. She was hesitating over whether she should hand over the space ring to save her uncle's life or not. However, after learning about the effects of the spiritual root of heavenly ways, she also understood just how important it was to the Yun family. If she gave the spiritual root of heavenly ways to a great elder, not only would the great elder's cultivation increase from 1 heavenly layer to 3 heavenly layers in a short amount of time, but it was extremely likely for the great elder to become a chaotic prime in the future. Once the Yun family possessed a chaotic prime, they would immediately become a peak organization in the Sky Empire. They would basically stand on equal footing with the imperial family. The spiritual root of heavenly ways was directly related to the hopes of the Yun family rising up. Yunxin carefully extended the senses of her soul into the space ring. She wanted to confirm whether the spiritual root of heavenly ways was in her hands or not. The space ring was empty. There was only a root that was less than a foot long at the very center. It radiated with the power of ways, as if it contained the truths of the world. Yunxin confirmed that it was the spiritual root of heavenly ways the moment she saw it. After some hesitation, Yunxin shoved the space ring into Jianchen's hands and said secretly, "Jianchen, there's something I really hope you can help me with. You must have guessed it already. There really is a spiritual root of heavenly ways in this space ring. I'll give you the spiritual root of heavenly ways right now. Immediately leave the Azure Poseidon Palace with the spiritual root of heavenly ways and give it to the great elder of our Yun family. From today onwards, you will be the greatest benefactor of our Yun family. Our Yun family will never mistreat you." Yunxin felt extremely helpless when she made this decision. She knew that Mo Cheng would learn that the spiritual root of heavenly ways was in her hands very soon. She had no confidence in escaping from Mo Cheng. The only thing she could do was place her hopes on Jianchen. Even though she knew that this decision would also lead to the risk of Jianchen taking the spiritual root of heavenly ways for himself, she really had no other choice. Even if the spiritual root of heavenly ways really does end up in Jianchen's hands, it's still better than it ending up in Mo Cheng's hands. Yunxin sighed inside. Jianchen was stunned. He turned his head slightly and stared at Yunxin in surprise. "I won't leak the news that the spiritual root of heavenly ways is in your hands. I'll create an illusion that the spiritual root of heavenly ways is in my hands to keep Mo Cheng busy and buy you some time, but it won't be for much longer. Hurry up and leave the Azure Poseidon Palace as quickly as you can," Yunxin said again. Determination filled her eyes. "If you trick Mo Cheng, it's impossible for Mo Cheng to spare you. Only death awaits you. You need to consider this carefully," Jianchen replied. Yunxin gritted her teeth. she said with determination. If my death can give the Yun family a brand new future, then I'll die with no regrets. Jianqin stared at Yunqin for a very long time. In the beginning, he was extremely repulsed by the young lady of the Yun family. However, only now did he truly see the other side of Yunqin. You don't have it. Mo Chang's eyes became colder and colder. Killing intent shone from his eyes. He casually tossed the space ring he had taken from Yun Daolai to the ground and said coldly, "Tell me, where is the spiritual root of heavenly ways hidden? What are you standing there for? Hurry up and leave." Yunqin's face changed as she immediately urged Jianqin. She knew that she could not keep it a secret for much longer. Jianqin handed the space ring back to Yunqin. He said through his voice, "They're blocking the exit. You can't leave even if you want to. Moreover, do you think anyone will be able to leave before Mo Cheng finds the spiritual root of heavenly ways?" Although Mo Cheng's strength isn't enough to catch the attention of some divine kings, the old man beside him is extraordinary. Jianqin was unable to see through the old man's strength as well. This was because the old man hid his strength far too well. No matter how he looked at him, he seemed like an ordinary person. However, Kea could even see through hidden infinite primes, so the old man obviously could not hide from Kea. Kea had already told Jianqin that the old man was extremely powerful, far more powerful than any divine king she had encountered so far. "Fellow Mo Cheng, I saw this person hand a space ring to this woman earlier. If I've guessed correctly, the spiritual root of heavenly ways should be in there." At this moment, a divine king in the garden clasped his fist and said before pointing towards Yunqin. Not only was Mo Cheng first on the Overgod's plaque, but he would definitely become an expert on the same level as the divine king in the future. Moreover, his background was tremendous. So many people were willing to befriend him. Clearly, the divine king in the garden wanted to befriend Mo Cheng by telling him this. Yun Xian's face immediately became extremely pale. Mo Cheng slowly made his way towards Yunqin as a powerful pressure slowly radiated from him. Hand over the spiritual root of heavenly ways, Mo Cheng's gaze was as sharp as a sword as he stared right at Yunqin. Yunqin did not dare to look him in the eye. Yunqin tightened her grip on the space ring. She was also unwilling to accept this. After all, this was related to the hopes of her Yun family rising up. However, she also knew that even though she possessed the spiritual root of heavenly ways right now, she could not keep it. The hopes of our Yun family rising up have been destroyed by my hands just like this. Tears flowed uncontrollably from Yunqin's eyes. She looked at the space ring in her hand reluctantly. She was about to hand it over to Mo Cheng. At this moment, she had no other choice at all. The spiritual root of heavenly ways already belongs to someone, and it's related to the hopes of her clan rising up. Mo Cheng, it's best if you don't force her. At this moment, Jianqin walked over and blocked Yunqin's path. He stared at Mo Cheng calmly. Mo Cheng was surprised when he saw Jianqin block his path. Jianqin did not conceal his presence, so he could clearly sense that Jianqin's cultivation was the same as his. They were both late overgods. Who knew how many years it had been since a late overgod had dared to disobey him? All the overgods and the divine king gathered in the divine medicinal garden were stunned when they witnessed this. Disbelief filled their faces. Who is this kid? He really doesn't know his place. Does he think he's the divine king? How dare he talk back to Mo Cheng? In Mo Cheng's eyes, he's nothing compared to the divine king. So what if he's a god king? Didn't you see the battle prowess he displayed earlier? It's far greater than many early god kings. Don't tell me this wild kid hasn't even heard of the Overgod's plaque. He's only a late overgod, yet he dares to talk back to Mo Cheng. He really is looking for death. Discussions rang out in the divine medicinal garden. Many people mocked and mocked Jianqin. Of course, there were a few people who looked at Jianqin sympathetically. It was indeed praiseworthy to lend a helping hand in the face of injustice, but they had to act within their means. On the 1st of January, 2017, Xiaoyao has prepared a red packet for everyone. When the time comes, Xiaoyao will announce the password for the red packet. Although there won't be a lot of red packets, it can be used as a form of entertainment. However, due to the fact that the Chaotic Sword Gods update time is not fixed on the various platforms, some platforms will even be delayed by a day. As a result, in order for everyone to receive the password for the red packet as soon as possible, Xiaoyao will announce the password for the red packet through the community Prestige channel. Please pay attention to it if you haven't listened to Xiaoyao's community Prestige channel. It will only take a minute. Xiaoyao's community Prestige channel. Xingxing Xiao 110-inch Xinqing Xiaoyao was the full pinyin of the pen name, plus the number 110. Readers of the Sword God and fans of the Sword God, please listen in. Chapter 2046. You sure are bold to interfere with my matters. Mo Qing stared at Jianqin coldly as he said emotionlessly. Kea, who stood beside Jianqin, became furious when he heard that. Mo Chang was only a late over-god, the same level of cultivation as them, yet he was so arrogant and condescending. Yunqin had already become filled with despair. Although she knew that Jianqin and Kea were very powerful and were also supreme experts on the over-gods plaque, Mo Cheng's name was just too resounding. He ranked first on the over-gods plaque. Just this ranking alone was enough to make many people fearful. As for Xiao Zheng, he felt uneasy as well. He was an early divine king. Yunqin could not compare to him in terms of both knowledge and insight. Jianqin and Kea's battle against the two divine king on the 7th floor allowed him to clearly witness the strength of Jianqin and Kea. Xiao Zheng believed that even if Jianqin and Kea were not Mo Cheng's opponent in an open battle, they would not be too far off. However, there was an azure-robed old man behind Mo Cheng who was completely unfathomable. With the old man present, it was impossible for them to gain any benefits. As a result, in Xiao Zheng's opinion, offending Mo Cheng was a very unwise decision. It's rather troublesome now, Xiao Zheng frowned. Jianqin did not mind Mo Cheng's coldness at all. He smiled indifferently and said, I promised the Yun family that I would protect Miss Yunqin for a year in the Poseidon Palace. As a result, anyone who wants to harm Yunqin will have to go through me first. With that, many people in the divine medicinal garden immediately sneered. They all looked at Jianqin as if they were looking at an idiot. Who is this person? He's so arrogant, daring to speak like this in front of Mo Cheng. Although Mo Cheng is a little arrogant, he has the right to be arrogant. Who is this little rascal? I've never heard of him before. He doesn't seem like a supreme figure in the top 10 of the Overgods plaque. Yet he's bold enough to challenge Mo Cheng. He still wants to protect me for a year. After offending Mo Cheng, he can't even protect himself now. The green-clothed elder behind Mo Cheng also lifted his eyes at this moment. His gaze landed on Jianqin as a sliver of surprise appeared on his face. Mo Cheng's eyes flashed as he said, Get past you? If you were a slightly more powerful early-stage divine king, I might have taken you seriously. But right now, you're nothing more than an ant in my eyes. You don't have the right to block my path. Back down. With that, Mo Cheng extended a finger, and a strand of sword chi immediately shot out. With a sharp light, it shot towards Jianqin as a bolt of lightning. He was rather conceited. He believed that no one among overgods was his opponent, so he did not take Jianqin seriously at all. He did not even bother to use a sword. This Mo Cheng really is a supreme overgod who ranks first on the overgod's plaque. His strength really is extraordinary. Just the sword chi he has casually shot out is not something regular late overgods can contend with. His comprehension of the laws of the sword is no weaker than mine. He's reached the limits of the partial achievement of sword spirit and is only a step away from the major achievement of sword spirit, Jianqin thought. He was composed and composed. He also extended a finger, and a strand of sword chi shot out. Swish! The sword chi tore through the air with lightning speed. With a flash of silver-white light, the two strands of sword chi collided, erupting with a heavy sound. I never thought this little rascal would have grasped the laws of the sword. So what if he has grasped the laws of the sword? The same law in the hands of different people will unleash different powers. How can this brat who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth be a match for Emo Chung? Just watch. With just this, we'll be able to determine the winner, many people discussed. No one was optimistic about Jianchen's chances. But very soon, the people who originally looked down on Jianchen were all taken aback. When the two strands of sword chi collided in the air, they both collapsed. Neither of them managed to gain the upper hand. Jianchen and Emo Cheng were equally matched in this clash. I couldn't tell. This kid has some strength. That doesn't mean anything. That was just a very casual strike from Emo Chung. He didn't even use a sword. If Emo Chung was a little more serious, he would only need a few moves, no, just a single move, to defeat his opponent. Emo Cheng's eyes narrowed. He said, coldly, "To be able to block my sword chi so easily, you really do have some strength. You have the right to make me use a sword." A sword appeared in Emo Cheng's hand. The entire sword was enveloped by a hazy layer of light. Sword chi pulsed at the tip of the sword, radiating with powerful sword chi. A supreme quality saint artifact. Jianchen looked at the sword in Emo Cheng's hand. The high-quality saint artifact that he had once used, the startling rainbow sword, had already shattered. He had always been searching for a suitable supreme quality saint artifact, but even now he had yet to find one that satisfied him. Look, Emo Cheng is going to use his full strength. It's extremely rare to see the battle of the champion of the Overgods plaque. All the Overgods in the divine medicinal garden gathered their attention. Even some of the divine kings were drawn over. The light in Xiao Zheng's eyes flickered as well. He also anticipated the battle between Jianchen and Emo Cheng. He wondered just how much of a difference there was between Jianchen and Emo Cheng. I won't hold back when I attack next. It's still not too late for you to back off now. You need to understand that you can't stop me from obtaining the spiritual root of heavenly ways, Emo Cheng said coldly and emotionlessly. Are you so sure that I can't stop you? Unless you get the person behind you to do it, Jianchen said calmly. A gleam of light flashed through the eyes of the azure-robed old man behind Emo Cheng. He glanced at Jianchen meaningfully and chuckled. Little guy, don't worry. As long as the divine king doesn't appear, the old man obviously won't do anything either. Speaking of which, the old man really does hope that you can defeat Emo Cheng and take him down a peg or two. With a flash, the azure-robed old man had already retreated several kilometers away. However, he also knew that it was far, far too difficult to find an overgod who could defeat Emo Cheng. Emo Cheng did not care about what the azure-robed old man had said. His eyes shone brightly as battle intent surged. He said, "Since you're so confident, I'll promise you that if you defeat me, I'll give up on the spiritual root of heavenly ways." With that, Emo Jian directly struck out. His sword shone brightly as if it had fused with him. He directly stabbed his sword towards Jianchen. Jianchen took a step forward and went up to receive the attack. He condensed sword chi in his right hand and used it to fend off his opponent. They're fighting. Let's see how long that person can last against Emo Cheng. Is there even a need to watch? It definitely won't last more than 3 moves. Everyone held their breaths in the divine medicinal garden as they watched the battle attentively. Even some late god kings were attracted by the sight of Emo Cheng, who ranked first on the Overgod's plaque, fighting in person. Ding! With a clear sound, the sword chi condensed in Jianchen's hand struck the back of Emo Cheng's sword. As Jianchen's sword chi was extremely condensed, almost tangible, the strike actually produced the thrum of metal. When the two powerful forces collided, a powerful energy shockwave was produced. Scattered strands of sword chi filled the sky, but they were unable to do any damage to the divine medicinal garden. This was because all the god-tier herbs, including every single blade of grass and tree, were protected by powerful formations. Let alone them, even late Divine King or the Supreme Divine King below the Divine King would struggle to break through. What power! Emo Chung was surprised. When his Supreme Quality Saint artifact collided with Jianchen's sword chi, he only felt an extremely great power pass through the sword chi, shaking up his entire right arm until it became numb. However, in the next moment, Emo Cheng's eyes suddenly narrowed. He saw Jianchen's right hand become covered in a layer of bright light. He had actually directly grabbed the sword with his hand. Chapter 2047. Emo Cheng's sword shone brightly. As his right arm twitched, he wanted to directly cut off Jianchen's hand that held his sword. However, when Emo Cheng tried to swing his sword to cut off Jianchen's hand, he felt like his sword had been locked tightly by a great clamp. He was actually unable to control his Supreme Quality Saint artifact at all. That was not all. To his surprise, he actually struggled to harm Jianchen's hand even when he used his full strength. Emo Cheng's eyes immediately narrowed when he saw this. He was shocked by the toughness of Jianchen's body. Jianchen moved extremely quickly. He gripped Emo Cheng's sword with his right hand, and at the same time he suddenly struck out with his left hand. It turned into a finger, stabbing towards Emo Cheng as a faint blur. Swish! Jianchen moved just too quickly. Many overgods struggled to see him clearly. Every single move and strike he used had surpassed the level of overgods, reaching the level of the Divine King. Only a supreme prodigy like Emo Cheng could fend off overgods like them. In just a single instance, Jianchen's finger arrived before Emo Cheng's chest. The eyes of the azure-robed old man who had come with Emo Cheng immediately shone brightly. He stared at Jianchen closely as he was shocked inside as well. Emo Cheng's face changed slightly. He finally became stern from his carefree attitude. He bellowed out and no longer held back at all. He used the laws of the sword and the laws of destruction at the same time. The two powers of laws revolved around him, and as he extended a finger, the two powers of laws immediately shot towards Jianchen as an arrow. With a boom, the sword chi condensed in Jianchen's left hand collided with Emo Cheng's two powers of laws. The sword chi nullified each other, turning into fragments of sword chi that shot off in all directions like resplendent fireworks. After all, both of them possessed the same comprehension of the laws of the sword. They were both at the peak of the partial achievement of sword spirit, only a step away from the major achievement of sword spirit. In the competition of sword Dao laws, no one gained the upper hand. However, Emo Cheng had comprehended two laws after all. After the sword chi dispersed, the remaining laws of destruction did not weaken at all. Carrying a portion of Emo Cheng's cultivation, it continued to shoot towards Jianchen as a black streak of light. Immediately, the presence of destruction permeated the surroundings, destroying everything. It forced the origin energy in the surroundings to retreat, and all the spectating overgods were extremely shocked. Jianchen's face did not change. He clenched the fingers on his left hand into a fist as chaotic force surged within him. Not only did he push his body's defenses to the limit, but a strand of chaotic force also burst out of his body and enveloped his fist as a faint, black light. It also radiated with a presence of destruction. This aura was different from the laws of destruction. It was much stronger and more violent than the laws of destruction. If the laws of destruction were a furious beast, then the presence of chaotic force was a furious, bloodthirsty beast that had gone completely berserk. Boom! Jianchen's fist continued onwards with an unstoppable force, dispersing Emo Cheng's laws of destruction in a single stroke. Afterwards, his fist did not slow down at all. It continued on like a hot knife through butter, striking Emo Cheng's chest with great force with a heavy thud. The power contained in this punch was extremely strong, and it directly turned Emo Cheng's clothes into powder, revealing the inner armor that Emo Cheng was wearing underneath. At this moment, the inner armor flickered with light. It pulsed with energy, forming layers of defenses to protect Emo Cheng, blocking the power from Jianchen's fist. A supreme quality saint artifact. Jianchen's eyes narrowed. He could tell with a single glance that the inner armor was also a supreme quality saint artifact. Its defenses were extremely great. Defensive supreme quality saint artifacts were extremely valuable in the saint's world. They were extremely precious, far surpassing offensive supreme quality saint artifacts. Even though Emo Cheng was protected by a supreme quality saint artifact, Jianchen's strike basically failed to injure him at all. However, Jianchen possessed the chaotic body after all. His body was extremely tough, so the great power in the punch still forced him to stagger back. Jianchen gripped Emo Cheng's sword firmly with his right hand as he suddenly pulled back forcefully. Through the sword, he directly pulled Emo Cheng back. He pressed forward and arrived before Emo Cheng with a single step. He continued to swing his bloodied left hand towards Emo Cheng. Emo Cheng was stern as surging energy gathered around him. The laws of the sword and the laws of destruction condensed as well, clashing with Jianchen. His supreme quality saint artifact was gripped by Jianchen's right hand, so he was unable to break free immediately. Faced with Jianchen's close-range attack, Emo Cheng could only force himself to receive it. Bang! 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 With a series of heavy sounds, Jianchen changed between his fists and palms as he clashed with Emo Cheng time and time again. Even though Emo Cheng grasped the laws of the sword and the laws of destruction, Jianchen still managed to suppress Emo Cheng with the advantage of the chaotic body. Jianchen struck out extremely quickly. He threw punch after punch, palm after palm. He used his laws of the sword to nullify Emo Cheng's laws of the sword and his chaotic force and chaotic body to block Emo Cheng's laws of destruction and cultivation. He possessed the upper hand every time he struck out, striking Emo Cheng several times. However, Emo Cheng was protected by a supreme quality saint artifact, so he was not injured at all by Jianchen's attacks. On the other hand, both Jianchen's left hand and the right hand that gripped Emo Cheng's sword were covered in blood. After all, he was made of flesh and blood. Even though the chaotic body was very powerful, he was unable to remain unscathed against Emo Cheng's attacks. Many overgods struggled to see the battle between Jianchen and Emo Cheng clearly in the divine medicinal garden. Even with the senses of their souls, they only knew that Emo Cheng was unscathed while Jianchen's hands were injured. However, the God Kings saw everything clearly. This result left all of them dumbfounded. They were all stunned on the spot. They found it difficult to accept. Emo Cheng was the supreme overgod who ranked first on the overgod's plaque. He was renowned throughout the saints' world. His strength was so great that he was the undisputed strongest overgod, even with the entire saints' world in perspective. However, at this moment, Emo Cheng, who was publicly acknowledged to be invincible among overgods, had actually been suppressed by someone at the same level as him. Moreover, his opponent was an unknown overgod. This outcome shocked everyone present. The Divine King understood that the reason why Emo Cheng remained unscathed was not because of his strength. Instead, it was because he possessed a supreme quality saint artifact. Emo Cheng's supreme quality saint artifact could be described as both offensive and defensive. Whether it was offensive or defensive, it had reached perfection. However, his opponent, the unknown overgod, had yet to use a single saint artifact. Who is this overgod? Where did he come from? Everyone was extremely shocked. Many of them guessed Jianchen's identity. The battle prowess that Jianchen had displayed had a great impact on all the Divine King. Emo Cheng was able to kill an ordinary early Divine King as a late overgod. That was already impressive enough to shake up the saints' world. However, They had discovered an over-god who was even more powerful than Mo Cheng. Arg! Mo Cheng bellowed out at the sky. His presence skyrocketed, surging into the clouds. At that moment, he felt extremely furious. Even though he had clashed with Jianqin several times, he had been completely suppressed. If it were not for his supreme quality saint artifact, his wounds would have been far more severe than Jianqin's. He struggled to accept this outcome. The laws of destruction and the laws of the sword condensed at the same time. Mo Cheng erupted with all his power and condensed it in his left hand. He struck out as hard as he could against Jianqin's sword. P.S. On the 1st of January, 2017, Xiaoyao has prepared a red packet for everyone. When the time comes, Xiaoyao will announce the password for the red packet. Although there won't be a lot of red packets, they can be used as a form of entertainment. However, due to the fact that the Chaotic Sword God's update time is not fixed on the various platforms, some platforms will even be delayed by a day. As a result, in order for everyone to receive the password for the red packet as soon as possible, Xiaoyao will release the password for the red packet through Community Prestige. Please pay attention to it if you have not listened to Xiaoyao's Community Prestige. It will only take a minute. Xiaoyao's Community Prestige signal, Xingxing Xiao 110-inch Xinqing Xiaoyao, was the full pinyin of the pen name, plus the number 110. Readers of the Sword God, fans of the Sword God, please listen in. Chapter 2048. The sword immediately produced a clear thrum after receiving Mo Cheng's palm strike. It began to tremble violently. As all the power gathered in Mo Cheng's left hand poured into the sword, the light from the sword immediately swelled. It erupted with unparalleled power. The laws of the sword and the laws of destruction coexisted, erupting with resplendent light. Jianqin frowned slightly. Chaotic force also surged from his right hand that gripped the sword. However, the power that erupted from Mo Cheng's sword was just too great. As the sword qi surged, it actually broke free from Jianqin's grasp. Jianqin's right hand had already become dyed red. It was the chaotic blood that had seeped out from his hand. After all, he had restrained a supreme quality, saint artifact. The saint artifact itself possessed extraordinary power, and now that it was being used by Mo Cheng, the supreme overgod who ranked first on the overgod's plaque, he would still be injured even with his chaotic body. Mo Cheng regained control over the supreme quality saint artifact, and his presence skyrocketed. His vital energies had all been raised to their peak condition. They shone like lightning, which was extremely shocking. Powerful sword intent revolved around him. You are indeed worthy of being my opponent. You have the right for me to use my full strength, Mo Cheng said coldly. Mo Cheng said coldly. He was emotionless and extremely cold. In the clash earlier, his sword had been bound, forcing him to engage in close combat with Jianqin. He had completely lost the upper hand, which was difficult for him to accept. As a result, he had already made up his mind. He would definitely redeem himself in the upcoming battle and defeat his opponent in an invincible manner. Mind and soul as one. Sword qi of human vitality. Mo Cheng called out. His presence surged as his hair fluttered in the wind. The supreme quality saint artifact in his hand shone like the sun. It was extremely resplendent, dyeing the entire divine medicinal garden snow white. As he suddenly swung down with his sword, a huge strand of sword qi immediately appeared as a silver-white streak of light. It possessed a portion of Mo Cheng's vital energies as it suddenly swung towards Jianqin. The streak of light was like a waterfall, rapidly extending through the air. It moved as quickly as it could. In the divine medicinal garden, many of the early divine king were secretly shocked. Mo Cheng's attack made many of them feel a fatal threat. More than half of the early stage divine king gathered here didn't have the confidence to withstand this attack. Daluo sword qi. However, Jianqin remained composed. He formed a seal and a strand of golden sword chi condensed. He wielded the Daluo sword and stabbed out. As soon as the sword appeared, Jianshan's entire mind seemed to fuse with the sword chi. At this moment, Jianshan felt as if his soul had fused with the sword chi in his hand. In an instant, a flash of inspiration appeared in Jianshan's mind. Vaguely, he seemed to have grasped something and had a kind of hazy enlightenment. However, in the end, it wasn't too clear. It was very vague, passing by in a flash, causing him to not truly comprehend it in the end. Boom! With a boom, the Daluo sword chi shone with golden light. The sword chi was startling. When it collided with Mo Cheng's mortal vitality sword chi, the mortal vitality sword chi that had fused with a portion of Mo Cheng's vital energies was actually no match for the Daluo sword chi. It was dispersed by the sword chi. Impossible, this is impossible. Mo Cheng's face was filled with disbelief. The mortal vitality sword chi was a battle skill of quite an impressive grade, yet it was no match for Jianshan's golden sword chi. He struggled to accept this. Before Mo Cheng could react, the dim Daluo sword chi turned into a streak of light under Jianshan's control, striking Mo Cheng with lightning-like speed. With a great boom, powerful shockwaves wreaked havoc in the surroundings. Mo Cheng was blown far away. His supreme quality saint artifact armor flickered, protecting him. Jianshan's attacks did not stop at all. They were as fierce as a storm. He formed a seal with his sword and condensed the Daluo sword chi again. He pursued Mo Cheng. His presence surged as his battle intent surged. He seemed invincible among his peers. In the divine medicinal garden, all the divine king became utterly stunned. Their hearts churned. They were unable to remain calm at all. All of them looked at Jianshan. An overwhelming change had occurred. Even Xiaozheng and Yunxin, who had seen Jianshan in action before, were stunned by Jianshan's strength. Only Kea and Master Chanlong, who understood Jianshan's strength extremely well, remained composed. Unity of world, sky-splitting sword chi. Mo Cheng became sterner and sterner. He knew that the opponent he was facing right now was unprecedentedly powerful. He immediately formed a seal with his hand and used his battle skill again, sending out a second strand of sword chi. The sky-splitting sword chi was even more powerful than the mortal vitality sword chi. It tore through the air with shocking might, causing the surroundings to change. It really did possess the power to split apart the world. Jianshan did not dodge the attack. Chaotic force filled his entire body as he used his body to receive the attack. Spurt! The sky-splitting sword chi pierced Jianshan's chest. Under the devastating sword chi, Jianshan's organs were pulverized. However, Jianshan's expression did not change at all. His gaze was extremely sharp as he condensed the Daluo sword chi in his right hand and lunged forward. He arrived before Mo Cheng in a single instance. The Daluo sword chi shone with golden light as it stabbed towards Mo Cheng. With a great boom, all the power of the Daluo sword chi struck Mo Cheng without weakening at all. It immediately erupted with a deafening boom. Jianshan had traded injury for injury. He had paid the price of injuring himself so that Mo Cheng could endure all the power of the Daluo sword chi. The power of the Daluo sword chi was indeed very shocking. In particular, as Jianshan's strength rapidly increased, the power of the sword chi rapidly increased as well. Even with the protection of a supreme quality saint artifact, Mo Cheng was unable to completely protect himself from the sword chi. Blood sprayed from his mouth as he was blown far away like a broken kite. As for Jianshan, he circulated his chaotic force. The chaotic blood from his chest actually flowed back into his wound as if it was attracted by something. Under the supreme recovery of the chaotic body, his wounds rapidly healed. Mo Cheng's body slammed into the mountain rock behind him with a loud bang. Every single blade of grass and tree there was protected by formations, so the rocks were naturally unscathed. However, Mo Cheng was reduced to a horrible shape. Arg! Emo Chung stood there with disheveled hair as blood dripped from the corner of his mouth. He roared out furiously at the sky as the laws of the sword and the laws of destruction revolved around him. He gave off a presence that could make many early divine king tremble. He slowly swung his sword before him as the laws of the world permeated it. The laws of the sword and the laws of destruction rapidly condensed. Clearly, he was using a powerful battle skill. Jianshin's eyes were cold as his presence surged. Even though his clothes had been dyed red with blood, he still stood there like an undefeatable god of war. He gave off a feeling of invincibility. He formed a seal with his hand, and his presence suddenly changed. Sword chi condensed around him as he turned into a sword, charging towards Emo Chung with an unstoppable presence. Tai sword technique. From afar, Jianshin was surrounded by resplendent light, making him seem like a huge sword as he shot out with lightning speed. With a flash of light, Jianshin appeared before Emo Chung before many people could see him clearly. Fast. He was just far too fast, let alone over gods. Even some early divine kings were unable to react in time, let alone block. Bang! Emo Chung did not have the time to use his battle skill at all. Jianshin had turned into a sword and stabbed him with terrifying might. The power of Jianshin's sword technique was just too shocking. It was far greater than when he used the laws of the sword alone. Even though Emo Chung was protected by a supreme quality saint artifact, which nullified most of the power, he was still struck to the point where blood constantly spurted from his mouth. His face became extremely pale, and he was knocked away powerlessly, landing heavily on the ground. This time, Emo Chung struggled to stand up. He was extremely heavily injured. If it were not for the supreme quality saint artifact, he would have died on the spot already. The divine medicinal garden fell silent. Everyone was silent as they stared at Jianshin with mixed feelings, or at Emo Chung, who had collapsed on the ground in disbelief. They were greatly shocked. Emo Chung ranked first on the Overgod's plaque. He was an unrivaled overgod in the saints' world, yet he had been defeated by an unknown opponent of the same level who had appeared out of nowhere. This was just far too difficult to accept. Emo Chung coughed up blood. He propped himself up with his sword and stood up with great difficulty. He looked at Jianshin with extremely mixed feelings and asked, "Who are you?" "Jianshin." Jianshin replied. His gaze towards Emo Chung was also filled with admiration. This was admiration towards Emo Chung's strength. Emo Chung was a late overgod, yet he could injure him quite heavily. Just this alone made Jianshin see him in a new light. He really was a supreme overgod who ranked first on the Overgod's plaque after all. Even though Jianshin had not broken through during the time he had spent in outer space, his strength was no longer the same as before. Even regular early divine kings would struggle to harm him, yet Emo Chung had done it. "Jianshin?" Emo Chung murmured. "Why have I never heard of your name? And you're not on the Overgod's plaque either." "That's because I've never attempted the Overgod's plaque, so my name has never appeared on it." Jianshin said, "Moreover, the saints' world is a world where the strong prey on the weak. So what if you rank first on the Overgod's plaque? Once you come across a divine king, you're still doomed. Even if you rank first on the divine king's plaque, you can only reign supreme in the divine king's realm. Once a powerful primordial realm expert appears, the supreme divine king will be reduced to meat on the chopping block." "I've lost." Emo Chung was absent-minded and somewhat disheartened. Clearly, this failure had a huge impact on him. The azure-robed old man appeared before Emo Chung. He fished out a healing pill and fed it to Emo Chung. He said, "Emo Chung, you should understand now. The saints' world is vast, and who knows how many monstrous geniuses there are. You need to know that there will always be someone stronger. Ranking first on the Overgod's plaque is not truly the strongest overgod. Ranking first on the Divine King's plaque is not the strongest Divine King's realm either. That's because there are many overgods and divine kings in the saints' world who don't care about rankings. They don't care about fame. Instead, they focus on cultivation and making their way towards the peak. P.S. On the 1st of January, 2017, Xiaoyao has prepared a red packet for everyone. Xiaoyao will announce the password for the red packet. Although there won't be a lot of red packets, it can be used as a form of entertainment. However, due to the fact that the Chaotic Sword Gods update time is not fixed on the various platforms, some platforms will even be delayed by a day. As a result, in order for everyone to receive the password for the red packet as soon as possible, Xiaoyao will release the password for the red packet through Gong Zhongwei. Please pay attention to it if you haven't listened to Xiaoyao's Gong Zhongwei. It will only take a minute. Xiaoyao's Gong Zhongwei signal, Xingxing Xiao 110-inch Xian Xing Xiaoyao, was the full pinyin of the pen name, plus the number 110. Readers of the Sword God, fans of the Sword God, please listen in. Moreover, every time a new chapter is released, you will be notified on the public account. There will also be some updates related to the book from time to time. Chapter 2049. The blue-robed old man's words were forceful and forceful. Every word echoed in Emo Cheng's mind like a great bell. Emo Cheng fell silent. This was not the first time he had heard the same thing. The old man had said similar things to him many times before. However, he was just too extraordinary. He had displayed extraordinary talent since he was young. Whether it was his talent for cultivation or comprehension, he was a supreme prodigy. He was renowned throughout the saints' world. Coupled with his powerful legacies and extraordinary cultivation methods, he had been able to reign supreme ever since he began cultivating. Rarely did he find an opponent at the same level of cultivation. As time went on, he developed a haughty attitude of being invincible, where he looked down on everyone. As a result, he had never taken the old man's warning to heart in the past. He believed that no one at the same level of cultivation could defeat him. If the people on the Overgods plaque were not enough, then it would be even more impossible for some unknown Overgods. However, only after his battle with Jianqin today did he truly understand something. Being first on the Overgods plaque was not necessarily first. Being first on the Divine King's plaque did not necessarily mean that he was invincible among Divine Kings either. This was because not all supreme prodigies would attempt the Overgods plaque and the Divine King's plaque in the Saints' world. But you don't need to be too dejected. With your current battle prowess, you've basically reached the apex among Overgods. Even with the entire Saints' world in perspective, there's barely anyone who can match you. Even some disciples of Grand Exalts might not be able to match you, the old man comforted him. He was also afraid that Emo Cheng would not be able to endure such a blow with his extraordinary talent and end up wasting away. However, Emo Cheng was not an ordinary person. He calmed down very soon, and his face lit up again. He stared at Jianqin with shining eyes and said coldly, "Jianqin, I'll remember your name. I am indeed not your opponent among Overgods, but I will challenge you again in the Divine King's plaque." Jianqin said with a calm expression, "If you can find me after breaking through to the Divine King realm, there's no harm in fighting you." Emo Cheng slowly lifted his hand. His hand was stained with a drop of Jianqin's chaotic blood. He took out a jade bottle and stored the drop of blood, saying, "It's not difficult for me to find you." Jianqin's eyes narrowed when he heard that. He stared at the droplet of chaotic blood that Emo Cheng had stowed away as light flickered in his eyes. From Emo Cheng's words, he could tell that Emo Cheng was able to find him in the vast saints' world with just a droplet of blood. Emo Cheng and the old man left the divine medicinal garden. After his defeat, he did not mention a single word about the spiritual root of heavenly ways. In the blink of an eye, the divine medicinal garden recovered its peace once again. Everyone stared at Jianqin. Many of their gazes were filled with undisguised respect and deep fear. They had personally witnessed Jianqin's strength. Not a single divine king in the divine medicinal garden could block Jianshin's attacks. Yun Daolai had already become stunned. He stared at Jianshin blankly. He had yet to return to his senses. Only now did he understand just how much of a monster Jianshin was. Even Mo Chung, who ranked first on the Overgod's plaque, had lost to him. In particular, Yun Daolai's heart trembled when he saw Jianshin and Mo Cheng's battle. The battle between the two Overgods was just too powerful. Even as an early divine king, he felt shaken. Yun Xian held the space ring with the spiritual root of heavenly ways as she felt extremely uneasy. However, at this moment, a figure silently approached Yun Xian. Greed filled his eyes as he directly reached for the space ring in Yun Xian's hand. The figure moved far too quickly, and he moved like a ghost. He was completely silent, such that many of the divine king failed to sense his intentions. Yun Xian was unable to react at all. Jianshin's eyes turned cold. Suddenly he looked at the figure, and his presence skyrocketed. Sword Qi surged into the sky as a strand of Daluo sword Qi shot over with lightning speed. Jianshin, you are indeed invincible among overgods, but you really are nothing in the domain of the divine king, the figure sneered. He blocked Jianshin's Daluo sword Qi with a wave of his hand while he reached for Yun Xian's space ring with his other hand. The spiritual root of heavenly ways is mine. The person was extremely excited. If the spiritual root of heavenly ways was in Mo Cheng's hands, he really would not be bold enough to take it, as there was an unfathomable old man behind Mo Cheng. However, if it was in Yun Xian's or Jianshin's hands, he would not have to worry at all. The late divine king. Jianshin shivered inside as he became extremely stern. This was definitely an extremely powerful opponent to him right now. Just when the late divine king was about to take Yun Xian's space ring, the power of the laws of destruction suddenly appeared. Kea, who had always been beside Yun Xian, struck out. She held the laws of destruction in one hand and the laws of fire in the other. The two powers of laws intertwined in her hands, forming a profound inscription of laws. She suddenly struck out, colliding with the hand of the divine king that reached for the space ring. With a thud, terrifying ripples of energy surged out. Yun Xian, who was the closest, immediately paled and staggered backwards. A set of silver-white armor appeared on her, blocking most of the ripples of energy. This was a high-quality defensive saint artifact. Although it was not as good as a supreme-quality defensive saint artifact, it was more than enough to block the ripples of energy. Kea staggered backwards as well. The difference in both cultivation and comprehension was just too great. Even though she was no weaker than Jianshin, she was unable to take on a late divine king. However, when she struck out this time, she forcefully forced back the late god king's hand that extended towards the space ring. A smear of surprise appeared in the eyes of the divine king. He glanced at Kea and snorted coldly. He did not stop at all. He took a step forward and arrived before Yun Xian in the blink of an eye, continuing to reach for the space ring. Oh no, he wants to take the spiritual root of heavenly ways. Stop him. We can't let him take the spiritual root of heavenly ways. Many divine kings in the divine medicinal garden returned to their senses. They immediately cried out and charged over as quickly as they could. All of their eyes burned with desire and undisguised greed. Clearly, they did not want to protect the spiritual root of heavenly ways for Yun Xian. Instead, they wanted to take it for themselves. The spiritual root of heavenly ways was nothing to a supreme prodigy with a tremendous background like Mo Cheng, but it was extremely tempting to the divine kings in the divine medicinal garden. A spiritual root of the heavenly Tao had a chance of creating a primordial chaos expert. It was enough to make them lose their minds and fight for it without regard for anything else. And don't. Yun Daolai cried out sorrowfully as despair filled his face. He had just managed to save the spiritual root of heavenly ways from Mo Cheng. yet it had attracted even more divine kings. He felt like the world had become gloomy. After all, not only were there many divine kings in the divine medicinal garden, but there were also late divine kings as well. No matter how astonishing Genshin's battle prowess was, it was useless against so many divine king experts. Genshin's eyes were cold and filled with killing intent. With a thought, he shot out a strand of profound sword chi without any hesitation. Chapter 2050. It was fast, just far too fast. The late Divine King was unable to react to the profound sword chi at all. The profound sword chi had already pierced his forehead and stabbed his soul. Arg! The Divine King immediately cried out in pain. His soul was unimaginably heavily injured. His consciousness blurred as he bled from his orifices. Kea had already arrived before the Divine King, silently. His presence surged as his eyes shone with cold light. He held the laws of destruction in one hand and the laws of fire in the other as he struck out with his full strength. He struck the late Divine King mercilessly, causing blood to spurt from his mouth. With his soul injured, the late Divine King's consciousness blurred and fell into chaos. Both his senses and defenses had plummeted. As his soul had not stabilized, he was basically powerless to fight back. Swish! A golden streak of light tore through the air. Genshin's Daluo sword chi also appeared before the Divine King. With a wave of the Daluo sword chi, he directly cut off the Divine King's head. Afterwards, with a flash of light, the Daluo sword chi surged into the air, stabbing towards the head that had flown into the air. Bang! The head exploded in the air. Golden sword chi filled the air, grinding the Divine King's extremely fragile soul to pieces. Genshin and Kea, two late overgods, had killed a late Divine King with lightning speed. Naturally, all the Divine Kings in the Divine Medicinal Garden witnessed this clearly. Their expressions immediately changed, and they could not help but slow down as well. They stared at Genshin and Kea in surprise and doubt. However, their hesitation only lasted for a split second. Their fear was replaced by deep greed as they rapidly approached Yin Xan. The spiritual root of heavenly ways was just too tempting to them. Very few of them could remain calm. They had all become muddle-headed. Genshin and Kea became extremely stern. Even the two of them felt powerless before so many divine kings. They could not flee. There were many late divine kings among them. Even if they fled, they would not be able to escape from the pursuit of the late divine kings. Even hiding in the Inata Tower was not enough. Although the Inata Tower was extremely tough, Genshin's control over it made it so that he could not move as quickly as a late divine king. After all, the space within the Poseidon Palace was flat, unlike the spatial cracks that were filled with dangers where even infinite primes needed to be careful. As a result, Genshin could hold his ground against infinite primes in the spatial cracks with the Inata Tower. However, he lost this advantage once he was outside. My formations are about to be cast down. Buy me some time. It'll be done in a few seconds, Master Chanlong's voice rang out. He had already cast down a defensive formation nearby when Genshin fought Mo Chung. Clearly, he had expected something like this to happen. If it really doesn't work out, I'll just hand over the spiritual root of heavenly ways, Yin Xan said as her face paled. I only managed to keep the spiritual root of heavenly ways after my battle against Mo Chung. How can I just hand it over to these people? Genshin snorted coldly. With a thought, he connected with the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline within him. He immediately activated it and howled at the sky. Immediately, a deafening howl rang out from Genshin's mouth. The terrifying sound waves formed visible ripples that expanded in all directions, enveloping the entire divine medicinal garden. At that moment, Genshin seemed to have become an ancient Skywolf. As he howled, an extremely terrifying pressure permeated the surroundings. The power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline within him was completely depleted at that moment. The Divine King that originally charged towards Jianchen's group seemed to lose all their strength at that moment. They all collapsed on the ground. The powerful inertia caused them to slide quite a distance on the ground. Many of them flipped a few times before coming to a stop. Afterwards, their eyes blanked out as if they had lost their souls. Their clothes were in tatters, revealing the inner armor they wore underneath. Even though some of the more powerful Divine King managed to control their bodies and prevent them from falling to the ground, they were stunned as well. Their souls were greatly affected. Some of the weaker overgods had their entire bodies split apart from the tremors. Their primordial spirits were directly shattered. Aside from them, even Yun Xian, Yun Daolai, and Xiaozheng were the same. Their eyes blanked out as they stood there in a daze. Only Kea and Master Chanlong were unaffected. Kea charged out as soon as possible. He used the laws of fire and the laws of destruction at the same time. He struck out as hard as he could to kill off the Divine King. Jianqin followed closely behind Kea. While all the Divine King were stunned, he struck out with lightning speed and killed off the Divine King. Among the God Kings, not all of them had put on their Saint artifact armor. Many of them did not put on any protection at all, so it was naturally much easier to deal with them. In just a few seconds, Jianqin and Kea each shattered the head of a Divine King, wiping out their souls. The threat that the Divine King posed to them in the Divine Medicinal Garden was especially great. Once Chanlong finished casting down his formations, the damage that the Divine King could cause to the formations would be far greater than early and mid-Divine King. As a result, they only struck out against the Divine King. However, just when they were about to kill off a second Divine King, the Divine King that had been affected actually returned to their senses at the same time. The two Divine King that had been attacked by Jianqin and Kea roared out furiously. They blocked the fatal attacks from Jianqin and Kea and began to engage in an intense battle. Afterwards, the Divine King that had been affected in the Divine Medicinal Garden returned to their senses, one by one. They realized that they had been momentarily stunned and that Jianqin and Kea had already killed the Divine King. All of them felt a lingering fear. Jianqin shivered inside. These people had returned to their senses much faster than he had imagined. He knew that the howl he had unleashed from the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline was nowhere near as threatening to these cultivators as a space beast. Bang! With a muffled sound, Jianqin's waist was struck by a Divine King. He was sent flying by the powerful force. Even Kea was injured and covered in blood. Even more Divine King charged at Yun Xian. Jianqin arrived in front of Yun Xian and tossed Yun Xian behind Master Chanlong. He roared out and blocked the Divine King with a powerful battle intent, engaging in an intense battle with the many Divine Kings. Kea also retreated as he fought. He did not hold back at all. He used the laws of fire, destruction, and creation at the same time, erupting with terrifying might as he engaged in an intense battle with the many Divine King. In just a few seconds, Jianqin was covered in blood. He was covered in wounds of various sizes. It was a vicious and terrifying sight. He had used everything he had. Aside from the Anata Tower, he had even used his final strand of profound sword chi. He had only managed to last until now because of his chaotic body. At this moment, a sliver of comprehension suddenly appeared in Jianqin's head. He grasped the sliver of insight tightly, and in the next moment, an even more powerful sword intent radiated from him. It was as vast as the ocean. Jianqin roared out at the sky. The sword chi around him became several times stronger in a single instance. Wu Kei formed a seal, and with just a thought, a strand of Daluo sword chi appeared out of nowhere. Not only did the Daluo sword chi condense countless times faster than before, basically condensing in an instant, but its power had also increased to a whole new level. At this moment, Jianqin's laws of the sword had finally broken through. He had reached the major achievement of sword spirit from the partial achievement of sword spirit. P.S. On the 1st of January, 2017, Xiaoyao has prepared a red packet for everyone. When the time comes, Xiaoyao will announce the password for the red packet. Although there won't be a lot of red packets, it can be used as a form of entertainment. However, due to the fact that the Chaos Sword Gods update time is not fixed on the various platforms, some platforms might even be delayed by a day. As a result, in order for everyone to receive the password for the red packet as soon as possible, Xiaoyao will announce the password for the red packet through Gong Zhongwei. Readers who have not listened to Xiaoyao's Gong Zhongwei will pay attention to it. It will only take a minute. Xiaoyao's Gong Zhongwei signal. Xinqing Xiaoyao 110 Xinqing Xiaoyao's pseudonym in full pinyin with the number 110 added to it. Readers of the Sword God, fans of the Sword God, please listen in. Chapter 2051. Reaching the major achievement of sword spirit had allowed Jianqin's comprehension of the laws of the sword to reach the level of a divine king. His chaotic body was still at the level of an overgod. As a result, his breakthrough was clearly not enough for Jianqin to deal with the current danger. Jianqin's wounds became heavier and heavier. He was completely covered in blood now. There were so many wounds on his body that it was astounding. Every single wound was vicious and terrifying, revealing white bone. However, Jianqin did not weaken at all despite being so heavily injured. His battle prowess was still extremely great. He was like an undying god of war as he engaged in an intense battle against the Divine King. Several Divine Kings had already died to Jianqin's hands. They were all early Divine King. These people had either had their foreheads pierced by Jianqin's sword chi, or their heads cracked from a palm strike. An early Divine King had even been forcefully ripped in half by Jianqin. It was an extremely shocking sight. Kea was also heavily injured. He was covered in blood as he used the laws of creation, destruction, and fire at the same time to engage in an intense battle against the Divine King. All the Divine Kings in the garden were shocked. Their gazes towards Jianqin and Kea were filled with shock and fear. The two Divine Kings were actually able to last for so long against the encirclement of so many Divine Kings. They had even killed a few early Divine Kings. Such a powerful over-god filled all of them with fear. Specks of blood-red light suddenly flickered in Jianqin's eyes. Vaguely, an evil presence seemed to slowly awaken within him. Not only was he heavily injured right now, but most of the power of his soul had been depleted by the 2 strands of profound sword chi as well. Coupled with the heavy smell of blood, he struggled to suppress the evil spirit's power that had fused with his soul. In the past few years, his strength had grown far too quickly, far surpassing the evil power. As a result, no matter how heavily injured he was, the evil power in his soul was unable to affect his mind. However, the evil power had benefited even more than him when he absorbed the droplet of power from the ancient Skywolf's bloodline. As a result, the evil power had become much stronger. As a result, Jianqin seemed to struggle to suppress it. "Master!" The sword spirits immediately sensed Jianqin's situation. Their voices boomed through Jianqin's soul. When Jianqin, Kea, and Chanlong had drifted through outer space, Jianqin had been heavily injured a few times as well. The power of his soul had been greatly depleted, so he was unable to suppress the evil power. It was the sword spirits who had awakened him immediately, preventing Jianqin from completely losing his mind. Jianqin did his best to maintain his consciousness as he fended off the attacks in the surroundings. He was constantly injured as his wounds rapidly increased. Many penetrating wounds had appeared, and his organs had already shattered. He was only holding on with the chaotic body. He, a mere over-god, wants to protect the spiritual root of heavenly ways? What a fool's dream! At this moment, a sinister laugh rang out in Yunqin's head. As Yunqin paled in fright, a hand extended out from the space before her and took away Yunqin's space ring. Not only had he taken away the space ring that Yun Daolai had given to Yunxin, but he had also taken away the space ring on Yunxin's finger to prevent her from moving the spiritual root of heavenly ways. Clearly, he was a late divine king. He made his way around Jianqin and Kea and approached Yunxin. "Bastard, leave the space ring behind. Don't let him leave." Behind Yunxin, a few more divine king approached. They had also made their way around Jianqin and Kea, approaching Yunxin silently from the other side. They wanted to take the space ring. However, when they saw that someone else had taken the space ring first, they immediately became furious. They immediately looked at the divine king who had hidden himself in space and struck out without any hesitation. They used powerful energy to shake up the space and force out the person who had hidden himself. The divine king laughed aloud after taking away the space ring. He did not attack anyone. He hid himself in space again, wanting to leave immediately. "Rise." At this moment, Master Chanlong finally finished setting up the formation. With a bellow, the formation finally rose up. With a powerful pulse of energy, a hemispherical barrier of energy formed in a single moment, enveloping an area of 100 meters. Apart from Divine King Chanlong, Yunxin, and Xiaozheng, there were a few divine kings who had made their way around from the side. As they were too close, they were also enveloped by the barrier of energy. Bang! With a thud, the divine king who was about to flee with the space ring slammed into the barrier of energy. The barrier remained unscathed, but he fell out of space. He cursed inside and immediately attacked the barrier in a panic. "Enter the formation." Master Chanlong ignored the people in the barrier of energy and called out to Jianqin and Kea. Jianqin roared out at the sky. His eyes shone brightly as he suppressed the evil power that was about to awaken. He immediately sent out a few strands of Daluo, sword chi, approaching the barrier of energy as quickly as he could. Afterwards, his entire body fused with the barrier, entering it without any resistance at all. Kea entered the barrier of energy at basically the same time as Jianqin. Behind them, many divine kings pressed over as well. However, they were unable to directly pass through the barrier of energy like Jianqin and Kea. All of them were blocked outside. "God damn it, get through this formation." Outside the barrier of energy, many divine kings attacked the barrier, causing it to tremble. Master Chanlong became stern. He fished out a large number of divine crystals from his space ring and sent them into the formation. He growled, "I need to stabilize the formation. Hurry up and deal with the people who have entered the formation. I'll control the formation to assist you." Without any hesitation, Jianqin and Kea immediately charged at the divine kings who had entered the barrier of energy. Xiao Zhang moved as well, charging at a mid-divine king. Under Master Chanlong's control, the barrier of energy shot out strands of white energy that wrapped around the divine kings. From time to time, pillars of energy would shoot out, piercing their bodies. Not only did the formation have defensive properties, but it also had offensive properties. The divine kings who had entered the formation all fell to the hands of Jianqin and Kea. Even the late divine king among them struggled to survive. Outside the barrier of energy, the many divine kings of the divine medicinal garden surrounded it and launched fierce attacks at it. Even though the barrier was very tough, it still trembled when faced with the combined attacks of so many divine kings. It even showed signs of collapsing several times. In the end, Master Chanlong stabilized it. "The energy is being drained too quickly. Quick, give me divine crystals." Master Chanlong called out. He had stepped into the divine king's realm, and the formation he had cast down had reached a new level as well. However, the formation he had cast down in a hurry was extraordinarily difficult to block the attacks of so many divine kings. Jianqin could not be bothered to heal. He immediately took out 10 blocks of supreme-grade divine crystals from his space ring and gave them to Master Chanlong. He placed them in the eye of the formation. With the support of 10 blocks of supreme-grade divine crystals, the trembling of the barrier immediately slowed down slightly. However, it was still distorted by the attacks of so many divine kings. Chapter 2052. He did not have a lot of divine crystals left in his space ring. Most of the supreme-grade divine crystals he had obtained from the commander of the 9th Army of the Heavenly Demon Religion, Yaxilian, had already been used up. He only had around a dozen blocks left. Jianqin frowned. With a flip of his hand, several space rings appeared in his hand. He immediately sent his soul into them. These space rings all belonged to the divine kings who had broken into the energy barrier. They had all been slain by Jianqin and Kea, so their space rings were naturally not left behind. Jianqin discovered quite a few divine crystals in the space rings, as expected. He immediately took them all out. However, to his regret, there were late divine kings among the divine kings they had slain, but they were not very wealthy. There were only around a dozen blocks of divine crystals in total. It's a pity that I didn't manage to obtain the space rings of the early divine kings that I killed earlier. It's a free pass, Jianqin thought. He had been fighting against the divine kings earlier, so he did not have the energy to collect the space rings. Over 30 blocks of supreme-grade divine crystals should be enough to last for a while. However, this formation alone won't be able to last for long. Jianqin, keep an eye on the formation. I'm going to continue laying down, Master Chanlong said sternly. He immediately began to lay down a new formation. Kea, heal up first. Leave this to me for now. There might be a fierce battle later on. Jianqin gave the best healing medicine he had on him to Kea. He could not help but feel a deep sense of guilt when he saw Kea bathed in blood. Sigh, it's all because of my stubbornness that you ended up in such a predicament. Kea, I'm sorry. Jianqin blamed himself. Originally, he could have made another choice. As long as he gave up the spiritual route of the heavenly way, he would not have become the target of public criticism. However, he had only managed to keep the spiritual route of heavenly ways after his battle with Mo Chung. He was basically half the owner of the spiritual route of heavenly ways. He was truly unwilling to give it up and let others take advantage of him. Kea gently smiled. His pale face didn't show the slightest hint of reproach. Instead, he revealed a trace of excitement and said, Jianqin, I discovered that experiencing such a battle would allow my strength to increase at an extremely fast rate. Kea paused before continuing. Back then, I didn't encounter any bottlenecks at all. I progressed extremely quickly, reaching late over God in a single stroke. However, when I reached late over God, I seemed to have encountered a bottleneck. My comprehension of laws was unable to progress any further, so I remained stagnant at late over God. Kea's eyes lit up. He stared at the divine king who constantly attacked the barrier and said, but when I fought against them earlier, I could clearly sense that my bottleneck seemed to loosen up bit by bit. Vaguely, I seemed to be able to see a corner of the divine king's cultivation. I shouldn't be far away from breaking through. Fantastic. My comprehension of the laws of the sword has already reached the same level as the divine king. As long as I have some time, my cultivation will reach the same level as the divine king. At that time, there really won't be many people who can truly threaten us in the Poseidon Palace with our battle prowess, Jianqin said excitedly. However, the matter at hand right now is to survive this crisis. Jianqin also looked outside the barrier. He had already prepared the resources he needed to break through to the chaotic body. Now that he had broken through with the laws of the sword, he only needed some time to reach the 12th layer of the chaotic body. However, the barrier could shatter at any time now. Clearly, it was not a good time to break through. Yunqin looked at the space ring in her hand reluctantly. Her space ring with the spiritual root of heavenly ways had been taken away, and the divine king had been slain by Jianqin, so the space ring had returned to her. Jianqin, this spiritual root of heavenly ways is for you. If it weren't for you, we wouldn't have been able to keep it. It would have ended up in someone else's hands long ago, and our Yun family no longer has the right to hold on to it. Yunqin slowly passed the space ring with the spiritual root of heavenly ways to Jianqin. She was dejected as she said gently, "If you really can't stop them, just hand over the spiritual root of heavenly ways." Yeah, Miss Yunqin is right. Jianqin, if you really can't do it, just hand over the spiritual root of heavenly ways. Xiao Zhang looked at Jianqin with mixed feelings. Undisguised amazement filled his eyes as he said, "Jianqin, both you and Kea possess unprecedented talent. I believe even some Grand Primes will fight over you as disciples and nurture you with everything they have. They'll be able to obtain various heavenly resources and God-tier pills easily. It's not worth it to force yourself into such dire straits over a spiritual root of heavenly ways." Jianqin looked at Yunqin silently. After hesitating slightly, he accepted the space ring with the spiritual root of heavenly ways decisively. Afterwards, he looked at the people outside the barrier as the light in his eyes flickered. At the same time, a group of people shot towards the divine medicinal garden with lightning speed several hundred kilometers away. They moved extremely quickly, crossing several kilometers in a single instance. There were around 50 people in the group. The person at the front was a valiant young man in violet armor. He seemed to be in his 20s, and his face was filled with undisguised arrogance. The purple soft armor he wore was actually an expensive, supreme quality saint artifact. It flickered with light and radiated with powerful energy pulses. Among the 50 people, no one was weaker than early Divine King. In reality, there were only a few early Divine King cultivators, and there were not many mid-Divine King cultivators either. Most of them were late Divine King cultivators. With so many late Divine King cultivators together, they formed a rather large group in the Poseidon Palace. However, all of them seemed to be led by the young man in the purple soft armor at the very front. Many of them looked at the young man with respect in their eyes, and even spoke in a low and subservient tone. "Fifth Prince, it's right up ahead. Through the imprint of the soul we left on Daolai, he should be several hundred kilometers up ahead," said Yun Weifeng from behind. Behind the youth, Yun Weifeng opened his mouth to speak. At this moment his face was pale, and his expression was somewhat dispirited. The clothes on his body were also dyed red with blood. Beside Yun Weifeng were 8 other divine kings from the Yun family, including Yun Lianqing. All of them were injured to varying degrees. A gleam of light flashed through the 5th prince's eyes. He became excited and said, "All right, everyone pick up the pace. We have to get there as quickly as possible. We can't let anything happen to the spiritual root of heavenly ways." The 5th prince's eyes burned with desire as his heart thumped uncontrollably. His blood seemed to boil. The spiritual root of heavenly ways was a spiritual root of heavenly ways that could create a chaotic prime. If a spiritual root of heavenly ways appeared in the outside world, the chaotic primes of various eternal empires and ancient clans would fight over it. This was because obtaining a spiritual root of heavenly ways would mean that the clan would gain a chaotic prime. This was a huge temptation to any eternal empire or ancient clan. It could directly affect the future of an eternal empire. Your Yun family has provided such important information this time. You have played a huge role. Don't worry. As long as I successfully obtain the spiritual root of heavenly ways, I definitely won't mistreat your Yun family, promised the 5th prince from the Sky Empire of the profound Thunderplane. P.S. On the 1st of January, 2017, Xiaoyao has prepared a red packet for everyone. When the time comes, Xiaoyao will announce the password for the red packet. Although it won't be a lot, it can be used as a form of entertainment. However, due to the fact that the Chaos Sword God's update time is not fixed on the various platforms, some platforms might even be delayed by a day. As a result, in order for everyone to receive the password for the red packet as soon as possible, Xiaoyao will announce the password through Community Prestige. Please pay attention to it if you haven't listened to Xiaoyao's community prestige. It will only take a minute. Xiaoyao's community prestige signal. Xinqing Xiaoyao 110 Xinqing Xiaoyao's pseudonym with the number 110 added to it. Readers of the Sword God, fans of the Sword God, please remember to listen. Chapter 2053. When Dao Lai separated from us, an over-god chased after him. The over-god was Mo Cheng, who ranked first on the over-god's plaque. Although we've never seen Mo Cheng fight, so we don't know how powerful he is, he's still a supreme over-god, ranked first on the over-god's plaque after all. Dao Lai is probably not his opponent. Your Highness, in order to ensure that the spiritual root of heavenly ways won't be taken away, we have to speed up, said Yun Lianqing. His pale face was filled with bitterness and helplessness. Aside from him, all the divine kings of the Yun family who were present were filled with reluctance and disappointment. The heavenly lost spirit root was discovered by them first, but when they were collecting the heavenly lost spirit root, they were discovered by the other divine kings. Those divine kings were also a small group, and although they were not as strong as them, they were not much weaker. As a result, the 16 divine kings of the Yun family naturally engaged in a battle of life and death in order to protect the spiritual root of heavenly ways. Their Yun family had paid a heavy price in this battle. 6 of the 16 divine kings had died. However, as the battle erupted, the disturbance from their battle naturally drew over more and more divine kings in the surroundings. As a result, in order to protect the spiritual root of heavenly ways, the divine kings of the Yun family gave it to Yun Daolai so that he could immediately leave the Azure Poseidon Palace with it. The rest of them stayed behind to keep the over-gods busy. The spiritual root of heavenly ways was just too important to their Yun family. It was an important treasure for their Yun family to become a peat clan in the Sky Empire. In order to protect the spiritual root of heavenly ways, all the divine kings of the Yun family were prepared to sacrifice themselves for the future of the clan. However, they had never thought that an over-god would pursue Yin Daolai as soon as he left. In the beginning, they did not take the over-god seriously, but when the over-god said, "I, Mo Cheng, want the spiritual root of heavenly ways," only then did they realize the over-god's identity. Even though they wanted to help, they couldn't do anything about it. In the end, the 5th prince of the Sky Empire arrived with a group of people. They knew that it was impossible for the heavily injured Yun Daolai to escape from the Azure Poseidon Palace before the supreme over-god who ranked first on the over-god's plaque, Mo Cheng. By then, let alone the spiritual root of heavenly ways, even Yun Daolai's life might be in danger. Therefore, they had no choice but to tell the 5th prince of the Sky Dynasty about the spiritual root of heavenly Tao and assist him in obtaining it. In any case, their Yun clan would not be able to obtain the spiritual root of heavenly Tao. Rather than letting it fall into the hands of others, they might as well take the initiative to offer it to the 5th prince. This was because their Yun family was in the Sky Empire. If they used this opportunity to establish ties with the 5th prince, the Yun family status would rise as well once the 5th prince ascended to the throne. There's a supreme divine king from the divine kings, throned by Mo Cheng's side. His name is Tsang Ying, and he ranks 950th on the divine king's throne. It's said that he can withstand 3 moves from regular infinite primes without being defeated. A scholarly middle-aged man beside the 5th prince said sternly, "Is there anyone among you who can stop Tsang Ying?" The 5th prince frowned. The scholarly middle-aged man said after some thought, "I'll probably need to work with Bai Qi and Bai He to stop Tsang Ying." The 5th prince was secretly surprised. He said sternly, "Tsang Ying ranks towards the bottom of the divine king's throne, yet he requires Mr. Shu and Mr. Bai Qi to work together to stop him. Is Tsang Ying really that powerful?" Mr. Shu is also a supreme divine king who sits on the divine king's throne. The scholarly middle-aged man said sternly, "Although I've sat on the divine king's throne, I haven't made it onto the divine king's throne. As a result, I'm not a supreme divine king from the divine king's throne. However, not only has Tsang-ing made it onto the throne, but he's even surpassed the 50 people who sit on the Divine King's throne. His strength really can't be underestimated. All right, once we come across Tsang-ing, Mr. Shu and Mr. Bai Qi will be responsible for stopping him. We'll speed up, the fifth prince called out as his blood boiled. Once he obtained the spiritual root of heavenly Tao, not only would his future be bright, but he would also become the emperor of the Jade Drop Majestic Empire. In the future, he might even become the Grand Sage Emperor of the Jade Drop Majestic Empire. Don't worry, fifth prince. The two of us would also like to experience the strength of the experts who sit on the Divine King's throne, chuckled a bald, burly man beside the fifth prince. He was Bai Qi. Beside Bai Qi was a black-clothed woman who seemed to be in her 30s. She gave off a wild aura. She was Bai Qi's sister, Bai He. The brother and sister were both at the peak of the Divine King's cultivation. Although they weren't on the same level as the Divine King's throne, the two of them were confident that they could put up a fight against the Divine King if they worked together. Yun Weifeng and the others couldn't get a word in edgewise. Although the Yun family also had a late Divine King, the difference between them and Mr. Shu and Bai Qi was huge. At the same level, the battle prowess they could erupt with would be different due to the different cultivation methods, battle skills, and laws they comprehended. There were even some cultivators who possessed special bloodlines, allowing them to erupt with supreme battle prowess through the power of their bloodline. Compared to these people, the Divine King of their Yun family was only an ordinary person. The energy barrier in the Divine Medicinal Garden twisted violently. More and more people attacked the barrier, causing the barrier's energy to deplete at an extremely rapid rate. Stop holding back. Everyone use your battle skills. Everyone use your full strength. Someone called out from the Divine Medicinal Garden and immediately used a powerful Truth Tier battle skill. Immediately, the barrier trembled more and more violently. A huge crack even appeared, and violent energy surged in through the crack. It wreaked havoc within the formation, turning into a storm that forced Yin Xian back. Master Chanlong's face changed as he cast down the formation. He immediately stopped what he was doing and focused all his attention on stabilizing the barrier. However, as the Divine King outside unleashed their full strength, the barrier began to tremble violently even with enough energy, and Master Chanlong personally stabilizing it. Cracks appeared on it, as if it was about to shatter. The supreme, grade divine crystals that provided energy in the center of the formation dimmed at a visible rate as well. "Oh no, we can't last much longer," Master Chanlong growled. He was stern. Kea stopped healing her wounds and stood up from the ground, her face solemn. Jianqin stared at the space ring in his hand. After a moment of hesitation, he suddenly pulled out the spiritual root of heavenly ways. He raised it high in the air and called out, "Everyone, you're all fighting over the spiritual root of heavenly ways. It's in my hands right now." Jianqin's voice boomed out, rousing everyone in the Divine Medicinal Garden. They all stared at the spiritual root of heavenly ways with burning desire. For a moment, they stopped attacking the barrier as well. The spiritual root of heavenly ways was only 3 inches tall. It seemed like the roots of a plant. There was nothing special about it, but it was surrounded by the truths of the world, as well as the power of laws. "Hand over the spiritual root of heavenly ways," many Divine King called out in the Divine Medicinal Garden as they stared at the spiritual root of heavenly ways. Jianqin sneered. He held the spiritual root of heavenly ways in one hand and opened Yin Xian's mouth with the other. Without waiting for Yin Xian's consent, he shoved the spiritual root of heavenly ways into Yin Xian's mouth. Ugh! Yin Xian was stunned. For a moment, she did not know what to do. She wanted to say something, but she could only make muffled sounds. She could not resist at all. "Damn it, stop! Stop! If you dare destroy the spiritual root of heavenly ways, I'll hunt you down to the ends of the world. Bastard, if you dare do that, I'll never let you go." All the divine king in the divine medicinal garden went crazy. Their eyes turned red as they attacked the barrier with all their might. Many of them looked at Jianqin with hatred and killing intent. Yun Xian had swallowed the spiritual root of heavenly ways. When she realized what she had just eaten, Yun Xian was completely dumbfounded. She stood there blankly. Now that the spiritual root of heavenly ways is gone, do you still want to fight over it? Jianqin stared at them coldly as heavy killing intent radiated from him. He said, "If you stop right now, I can let bygones be bygones. If you insist on attacking us, I, Jianqin, will definitely kill you. Don't doubt my strength. I've killed many divine king when I was an overgod. Let alone now that I've become a divine king," Jianqin said coldly. P.S. There was a mistake with the red packets today. After checking, it seems like Xiaoyao made a mistake and sent out red packets to a group. It's my fault that the password has failed. It's my fault. Xiaoyao will fix it again tomorrow. The password will still be given to everyone through the public account. Please forgive me. Chapter 2054. The noisy divine medicinal garden immediately fell silent. Many people stared at Jianqin, who was covered in wounds and covered in blood. However, his presence was still extremely shocking. Mixed feelings appeared on their faces. There were many gazes filled with hatred as well. Clearly, Jianqin's threat had deterred them to a certain extent. Many divine king in the divine medicinal garden became fearful. This was a supreme overgod who could easily defeat Mo Cheng. He could kill early divine king when he was a late divine king. Many divine kings in the divine medicinal garden shivered in fear from his overwhelming battle prowess. Now that Jianqin had set foot in the domain of divine kings, no one knew just how great Jianqin's battle prowess had become from the battle prowess he had displayed as an overgod. Don't be afraid, everyone. He's only broken through. His cultivation hasn't increased, and he's already heavily injured. He won't be able to last much longer. His presence right now is completely fake. In reality, he's only putting on a brave front. He's on the verge of dying. Don't be fooled by him. We only need a single late divine king to kill him easily. The spiritual root of heavenly ways has just been swallowed, so it probably hasn't been digested yet. Let's get through the formation immediately and kill that woman. Perhaps we'll be able to retrieve the spiritual root of heavenly ways in time. Not everyone was frightened by Jianqin's threat. There was still a small portion of people who refused to give up on the spiritual root of heavenly ways. They did not take Jianqin seriously at all. They fanned the flames from one side, trying to encourage everyone to continue fighting. Jianqin snorted coldly. Killing intent surged from him as he locked onto a mid-divine king who was fanning the flames. He directly charged out of the energy barrier and used the Tai sword technique. He turned into a sword and shot towards the divine king as a resplendent streak of light. After Jianqin's comprehension of the way of the sword had reached the advanced stage of sword spirit, not only had his strength increased, but the power of the various sword techniques he used had also increased several-fold. The expression of the divine king, who was fanning the flames in the crowd, suddenly changed when he sensed that Jianqin was attacking him. The divine king condensed his laws and struck out with the power of his cultivation base. He comprehended the law of water, one of the 5 elements. In terms of offense, the 5 elemental laws were inferior to the laws of sword and the laws of destruction, which were known as the strongest laws among the 3,000 laws. Moreover, the law of water was one of the weakest among the 5 elemental laws. As a result, when this divine king's mid-stage attack made contact with Jianqin, it was directly blasted apart by Jianqin. On the other hand, Jianqin had transformed into a huge sword. Without slowing down at all, he cut off his opponent's head. The divine king's expression changed drastically. His eyes were filled with deep fear. He immediately abandoned his body and controlled his head to fly into the air, flying out of the divine medicinal garden. During that time, his mouth was wide open as fear filled his face. He seemed to be crying out miserably. However, as his head had been separated from his body, he was unable to produce any sound at all. All he could see was his twisted face filled with extreme pain. Suddenly, the top of his head shattered, and his soul escaped from his head. Ripples of soul energy spread out, allowing everyone in the garden to hear his painful screams through the ripples of soul energy. A strand of sword chi had already invaded his soul. It was rapidly destroying his soul, causing him to suffer hellish pain. In just a few seconds, the Divine King's soul had been completely obliterated by the strand of sword chi under everyone's gazes. It completely dispersed. Jianqin had already returned to the energy barrier. He looked at everyone emotionlessly. He said nothing, but the coldness in his silence and the powerful battle intent he gave off gave the Divine King in the Divine Medicinal Garden extremely great pressure. Many people began to look at him differently. At that moment, Jianqin seemed like an undefeatable god of war in the eyes of everyone in the Divine Medicinal Garden. He was clearly unimaginably injured, but his battle prowess was still astonishing. This made many people shiver in fear. At the same time, another group of people charged over from the narrow path that led to the Divine Medicinal Garden. There were around 50 of them, and all of them were Divine King experts. Most of them were late Divine Kings, so they were quite powerful. They were the 5th Prince and the others from the Sky Empire from the profound Thunder Plain. To no surprise, the 9 Divine Kings of the Yun family were among them. Daolai. As soon as they entered the Divine Medicinal Garden, the Divine King of the Yun family immediately discovered the heavily injured Yun Daolai. With a flash, they arrived before him. At this moment, the 10 surviving Divine Kings of the Yun family had gathered together once more. However, none of them were as elegant as when they had first arrived. Every single one of them was covered in blood, and they were all injured to varying degrees. They were in extremely dire straits. So your Yun Daolai, is the spiritual root of heavenly ways still in your hands? The 5th Prince of the Sky Empire appeared before Yun Daolai. He stared at Yun Daolai closely, and his eyes were filled with desire and urgency. In his heart, he was determined to get the spiritual root of the heavenly way because it was related to his future achievements. Yun Daolai's expression was extremely mixed. He said nothing. Instead, he cast his gaze nearby. Everyone in the Divine Medicinal Garden had gathered there, forming a huge circle. From the outside, he could only see the energy barrier inside through the gaps between the people. The 5th Prince followed Yun Daolai's gaze and frowned slightly. He said, "The Divine Medicinal Garden is covered in formations, so it's impossible to take to the air. Mr. Shu, please clear a path." The scholarly, middle-aged man beside the 5th Prince nodded slightly. Afterwards, a fan appeared in his hand. Immediately, a terrifying pulse of energy radiated from the folding fan. The origin energy of the entire Divine Medicinal Garden became chaotic at that moment. Vaguely, it seemed like the laws of the world that filled the place had been disrupted to a certain extent. Such a scene was created by the folding fan in Mr. Shu's hand. Mr. Shu held the fan in his hand. As he channeled his origin energy into it, the fan immediately radiated with a dazzling divine light. At this moment, the fan was like a primordial beast that had awoken from its slumber. It radiated with an earth-shattering might. Everyone in the Divine Medicinal Garden was alarmed. Their faces all changed as they stared in Mr. Shu's direction. It was also at this moment that Mr. Shu slowly unfurled his fan, directly fanning it in front of everyone. With that, the entire world seemed to be overturned. Even the scorching sun in the sky was drowned out, causing the entire world to darken. A black whirlwind whistled towards all the god kings in the Divine Medicinal Garden. Under the ravaging of the black whirlwind, all of them struggled to stabilize themselves and staggered backwards uncontrollably. Even the late god kings suffered the same fate. Many overgods and early divine kings were directly blown away. They slammed into the rocks in the surroundings heavily, causing them to become dizzy. In the blink of an eye, the 1,000 overgods and god kings gathered around the energy barrier all retreated to several hundred meters away from Mr. Shu's wave of his hand. Jianqin and the others within the barrier were naturally exposed to the fifth prince as well. The divine kings of the Yun family all stared at Mr. Shu in shock. Disbelief filled their faces. They were deeply shocked by Mr. Shu's strength. Chapter 2055. The 10 divine kings of the Yun family could not help but stare at the fan in Mr. Shu's hand. Shock and undisguised envy filled their faces. They knew extremely well just how precious god artifacts were in the saints' world. For example, their Yun family had a total of 2 great elders who had reached infinite prime, but only one of them possessed a god artifact. Moreover, it was a low-quality god artifact. As for the other great elder, he still used a supreme quality saint artifact. Mr. Shu, according to my knowledge, only primordial realm experts can use god artifacts. Below the primordial realm, even if you wield a god artifact, you won't be able to unleash any of its power, or you'll suffer a backlash from the great power of the god artifact. May I ask why Mr. Shu is able to use a god artifact so easily? Yun Lianqing asked politely. His gaze towards Mr. Shu changed. The fifth prince glanced at the divine kings of the Yun family. Normally, he would never pay any attention to the divine kings of the Yun family with his status. However, when he thought about how he was about to obtain the spiritual root of heavenly ways, he was in a great mood. He took the initiative to explain, that's right. Under normal circumstances, people below the primordial realm won't be able to unleash any of the power of a god artifact. God artifacts are basically no different from scrap metal in their hands. This is because every single god artifact possesses an artifact spirit. They're extremely prideful, so it's impossible to gain the recognition of the artifact spirit unless you've reached the primordial realm. Moreover, even if you gain the recognition of the artifact spirit, the amount of energy required to use a god artifact is far greater than what regular divine kings can endure. Only infinite primes can unleash the true power of a god artifact as much as they want. However, Mr. Shu's cataclysmic onyx fan doesn't actually belong to Mr. Shu. Instead, it belongs to a subject of our Sky Empire. This subject is also Mr. Shu's master. The artifact spirit of the Tian Fiend obsidian fan has been instructed by Mr. Shu's master. In addition, the Tian Fiend obsidian fan still contains a portion of Mr. Shu's master's energy. As such, Mr. Shu only needs to pay a very small price to activate the power of the Tian Fiend obsidian fan. The God Kings of the Yun family came to a realization. They had already realized that Mr. Shu's master was definitely a great figure with supreme cultivation. Since he was willing to let his disciple take the god artifact into the Neptunian divine palace so easily, it meant that he was not worried about his disciple being killed or the god artifact being stolen. For example, although the grand elder of the Yun family also had a low-tier god artifact, he didn't dare to give it to them. The path ahead was cleared, and the fifth prince led everyone to stand before Jianqin and the others. Standing outside the energy shield, he sized up Jianqin, who was standing inside. "You're Mo Cheng, the person who ranked first on the Overgod's plaque." The fifth prince looked at Jianqin and frowned. He asked with uncertainty. He had learnt from the people of the Yun family that Yun Daolai, who had fled with the spiritual root of heavenly ways, was currently being pursued by Mo Cheng. A supreme divine king from the divine king's seat followed Mo Cheng. As a result, the spiritual root of heavenly ways had obviously ended up in Mo Cheng's hands. Now that he saw Jianqin's group being surrounded by so many people from the divine medicinal garden, he naturally believed that the person before him was probably Mo Cheng. However, what made him frown was that although he had never seen Mo Cheng before, he had heard about the supreme overgod who ranked first on the overgod's plaque to a certain degree. The person before him seemed to be rather different from the legendary Emocheng. Aside from that, he had not even seen the supreme, divine king beside Emocheng. The many divine kings around the fifth prince all studied Jianchen's group curiously. Only the divine kings from the Yun family, apart from Yun Daolai, revealed extremely strange expressions. Xian, Jianchen, Kea, Chanlong W, why are you here? Yun Lianqing cried out. He seemed like he had just discovered a new continent. Aside from Yun Daolai, the other divine kings of the Yun family also stared at the people in the energy shield blankly. Their faces were filled with doubt. However, the fifth prince's face sank slightly. Suddenly he experienced an ill omen. He looked at Yun Daolai and asked, "Where's the spiritual root of heavenly ways?" "Daolai, this is the fifth prince of the Sky Empire," Yun Lianqing said to Yun Daolai. Yun Lianqing said to Yun Daolai. He was afraid that Yun Daolai would offend the fifth prince because he didn't know who he was. Fifth prince, the spiritual root of heavenly ways, the spiritual root of heavenly ways. Yun Daolai seemed to have become dumbfounded. He muttered the name as his face paled. He was not an idiot. As soon as he heard that it was the fifth prince of the Sky Empire, he understood what decision the other people of the Yun family had made. It was exactly because of this that he felt fear. If the spiritual root of heavenly ways was still in his hands, he would not have reacted like this. Even if Emocheng had taken it away, he would not have felt fear. However, the spiritual root of heavenly ways just happened to be eaten by someone else, and the person who had eaten it was Yun Xan. "The spiritual root of heavenly ways is gone," said Jianchen. He walked out of the energy shield steadily and studied the fifth prince and the others. In the end, his gaze locked onto Mr. Shu, and he became extremely stern. He immediately told Chanlong to continue casting down formations secretly. The fifth prince's expression changed drastically. He glared at Jianchen and yelled out coldly, "What did you say?" "The spiritual root of heavenly ways is gone." The spiritual root of heavenly ways was an item of fortune that would determine whether he could become a chaotic prime in the future. The fifth prince had already become determined to obtain the spiritual root of heavenly ways. Even if Emocheng had taken it away, he would take it back regardless of the consequences of offending Emocheng. I ate the spiritual root of heavenly ways." Yun Xan walked out as well. She was basically on the brink of tears. She could clearly sense that the spiritual root of heavenly ways had already dissolved in her body, turning into the power of fortune that constantly modified her talent. The spiritual root of the heavenly Tao contained the truth of the heavens and the earth, and it was born from the good fortune of the heavens and the earth. It wasn't as violent as ordinary divine medicines, and those with weak strength would explode and die from it. As a result, Yun Xan did not feel any discomfort at all after eating the spiritual root of heavenly ways. "What did you say, Xana?" The expressions of the divine king of the Yun family all changed drastically. If it were any other place, they would definitely have been overjoyed or even laughed aloud. However, they only felt chills run down their bodies at this moment. They were filled with fear, and all of them became uneasy. The fifth prince's face sank. He stared straight at Yun Xan as his body trembled uncontrollably. This was caused by extreme anger. The fifth prince's reaction made Jianchen's heart sink slightly. He glanced at Yun Xan beside him and apologized to the fifth prince. Yun Xan is delighted to have obtained the spiritual root of heavenly ways. If she is nurtured properly, her future will be limitless. If everything goes well, becoming a chaotic prime won't be an illusion. At that time, the strength of the Sky Empire on the profound Thunder Plane will definitely skyrocket. It will only be a matter of time before we surpass the other eternal empires. I am Jianchen. I would like to congratulate the fifth prince and the Sky Empire on becoming the greatest eternal empire on the profound Thunder Plane. The fifth prince remained unmoved. His expression did not change at all. He stared at Yun Exan as his face became uneasy. In reality, he was already furious. He was tempted to immediately execute Yun Exan, who had eaten the spiritual root of heavenly ways. Chapter 2056. Your Highness, you must have seen it as well. As soon as we entered the divine medicinal garden, Exan, and the others were surrounded and attacked by basically all the divine kings in the divine medicinal garden. Under such tense circumstances, Exan had no choice but to swallow the spiritual root of heavenly ways. I hope your Highness can forgive me. Yun Lianqing stood behind the fifth prince as he spoke uneasily. The fifth prince possessed great authority in the Sky Empire. He could command hundreds of people with a single call. Out of the several dozen princes in the Sky Empire, he was one of the 3 most dazzling princes who had the greatest chance of becoming an emperor in the future. He was highly valued by the current emperor of the Sky Empire, and he had the support of a peak sect in the Sky Empire. His authority was so great that the Yun family could not afford to offend him. The hearts of the divine kings of the Yun family all sank when they saw how the fifth prince remained silent with a sunken face. Suddenly, the fifth prince's tightly furrowed brows relaxed, and a warm and enchanting smile appeared on his face. Immediately, it gave the Yun family members a feeling as if they were bathing in a spring breeze. It was as if the haze in their hearts had completely dissipated at this moment. Congratulations, Miss Yun Exan, for obtaining the spiritual root of heavenly ways. If everything goes smoothly, reaching chaotic prime will not be difficult. The fifth prince smiled at Yun Exan. Afterwards, under Yun Exan's surprised gaze, he clasped his fist at Yun Exan and said, Miss Yun Exan, you must know who I am already. I hope to take you as my wife. May I ask if you like me, Miss Yun Exan? Although the fifth prince spoke warmly and politely, his gaze towards Yun Exan was filled with some sharpness. He wanted everyone to understand that if Yun Exan did not agree, the outcome would not be good. Yun Exan's pale face became even paler. She wanted to turn him down, but she did not dare to speak. This was because the fifth prince had already made it clear. No matter what reason she used to turn him down, she would be looking down on him. If she offended the fifth prince in the Tsang Poseidon Palace, the Yun family would fall into great trouble without a doubt. It might even lead to disaster. At the same time, the divine kings of the Yun family constantly sent messages to Yun Exan. They all wanted Yun Exan to agree, first helplessly. Now that things had developed like this, the Yun family had no other choice. They could only compromise to ensure the safety of the family. Yun Exan gritted her teeth. Even though she was unwilling, she still agreed to become the fifth prince's wife in the end. From today onwards, I will cultivate diligently. Once I become powerful, I will make the fifth prince regret this for the rest of his life. Yun Exan made up of herself. Yun Exan made up her mind. Yun Exan. At most, she had reached a verbal agreement with the fifth prince. As long as they were not married, they were not considered husband and wife. The fifth prince laughed heartily and said, Good, good, good. From now on, this emperor and your Yun clan are one family. Exan, when we return to the profound Thunder Continent, I will immediately report this to my father and marry you. The fifth prince's unhappiness disappeared. Although he did not obtain the spiritual root of heavenly ways, as long as he married Yun Exan, the spiritual root of heavenly ways would not fall into the hands of an outsider. Moreover, with his relationship with Yun Exan, he would have an absolute advantage when fighting for the throne in the future. Exaner, let's go. You will follow me from now on. I will show you the splendor of the Tsang Poseidon Palace. The fifth prince stepped forward and put his arm around Yun Exan's waist. Yun Exan frowned. She twisted her body unnaturally, wanting to break free from the fifth prince's grasp. However, she discovered that she was unable to do so. Her face immediately changed, and she glanced at Jianqin beside her. In order to protect the spiritual root of heavenly ways, Jianqin had engaged in an intense battle with Mo Cheng before fending off so many Divine King in the Divine Medicinal Garden. Yun Xian could clearly remember all the difficult battles he had gone through. Yun Xian felt a pang of sorrow for some reason when she saw Jianqin bathed in blood and the terrifying wounds all over him. Yun Xian could not help but shed 2 streams of tears of regret when she thought about how she had made things difficult for Jianqin and how she had treated Jianqin when she first met Jianqin and learned that the 3 of them had taken up the spots that should have belonged to her 3 good friends. Jianqin, I'm sorry. Yun Xian could only apologize inside. Only now did she truly understand Jianqin. The 5th prince noticed all the subtle changes in Yun Xian. He looked at Jianqin and asked gently, who is he? The 5th prince's voice was filled with deep disdain for Jianqin. Your Highness, the 3 of them came across our Yun family along the way. Due to the limited number of Divine King of our Yun family, we gave the 3 extra spots to them. In exchange for the spots, the 3 of them will temporarily become Xian's guards in the Tsang Poseidon Palace to protect Xian from harm, Yun Lianqing immediately explained before Yun Xian could say anything. He understood the 5th prince's personality very well. Now that Xian had become the 5th prince's consort in name, he was afraid that the 5th prince would hold a grudge and make things difficult for Jianqin and the others. Xian, is that true? The 5th prince looked at Yun Xian. Yun Xian nodded without saying anything. The 5th prince glanced at Jianqin deeply before no longer staying there. He left the Divine Medicinal Garden with everyone. After the 5th prince and the others left, Master Chanlong emerged from the formations. He exhaled deeply and said, and I had thought that there would be an unavoidable battle, so I immediately cast down several formations as quickly as I could. Fortunately, the battle didn't begin, or even with my formations, we probably wouldn't have been able to stop the group of people because they have a god artifact. Jianqin sighed gently. I wonder if letting Yun Xian eat the spiritual root of heavenly ways was the right thing to do. Although it's a great, fortuitous encounter for her, it's also a pit of fire for her. Before she becomes truly powerful, she won't be able to break free from the 5th prince's clutches. Kea walked out as well. He stood beside Jianqin and looked at Jianqin's bloodied appearance. A sliver of mixed feelings appeared in his eyes as he asked nonchalantly, Was it worth it for you to do this? It's just that there are some things that can be done and some things that can't be done. It's not about whether it was worth it or not. However, it's all in the past now. Yun Xian has left with the 5th prince as well, so our agreement with the Yun family can be considered complete. Jianqin continued after a moment of thought. However, the 5th prince clearly saw the expression on Yun Xian's face when she left. He's not a kind person either, so no one knows what he'll do to us. Chapter 2057. Kea and Chanlong had no objections to Jianqin's suggestion. They both understood that even though they did not fear regular late Divine King when they worked together, they were still not the opponents of the extremely powerful late Divine King. Mr. Xu, who followed the 5th prince, was so powerful that he had completely surpassed regular late Divine King experts. Aside from Mr. Xu, there were probably a few other Divine Kings, Supreme Divine King in the Azure Poseidon Palace, as well. Once they came across these people, even if Jianqin, Chanlong, and Chanlong worked together, they would not stand a chance at victory. As a result, they urgently needed to increase their strength. After all, this was the 8th floor of the Azure Poseidon Palace. There were already many Divine Kings gathered here, unlike the lower floors, where most of them were over-gods. I need to enter secluded cultivation as well so that I can break through to the Divine King as soon as possible, said Kea. Whether it be in terms of cultivation or comprehension, they would suffer quite the disadvantage if they fought the Divine King as late over-gods. After making up their minds, Jianqin's group immediately left the Divine Medicinal Garden. Xiao Zheng did not plan on leaving by himself either. He remained with Jianqin's group. Fellow Jianchen, if you're looking for a place to cultivate, I do know a place that's extremely suitable for you. Xiao Zheng had already entered the Azure Poseidon Palace several times, so he was extremely familiar with the place. He took the initiative to lead the way for Jianchen's group. Fellow Jianchen, fellow Kea, fellow Chanlong, please come with me. Under Xiao Zheng's lead, Jianchen's group traveled over 1,000,000 kilometers in an extremely short amount of time. In the end, they stopped in a lush mountain range. As soon as they entered the mountain range, Jianchen's face changed. Not only was the origin energy 10 times denser than other places, but it was also completely condensed into mist. Moreover, Jianchen felt like the laws of the world had become much clearer in the mountain range. According to the records, this mountain range should be the greatest sacred mountain of the Taoist sect of Neptunia. It's called the Neptunian Mountains. It's said that the Neptunian Mountains are the greatest blessed land of the Taoist sect of Neptunia. The core of the mountain range is an extremely profound formation. It's exactly because of the existence of this formation that the Neptunian Mountains possess the wondrous ability to steal the fortune of the world and condense the mysteries of the world. Not only does it gather the purest origin energy of the world, but your understanding of the laws of the world will become even clearer when you cultivate here. It'll obviously be much easier to cultivate here. Clearly, Xiao Zheng knew a lot of information. He studied the mountain range in amazement as he explained to Jianchen's group. It's said that the strongest ancestor of the Taoist sect of Neptunia is on very good terms with a Grand Exalt. The formation in the Neptunian Mountains was personally cast down by this Grand Exalt. It really is like the work of the gods, as if it was created by nature. It contains the truths of the world. The Neptunian Mountains were originally placed outside the Azure Poseidon Palace for the core disciples to cultivate. Only when the Taoist sect of Neptunia faced a crisis did the Neptunian Mountains move into the Azure Poseidon Palace. It has always been placed here. Xiao Zheng, looks like you really do know a lot, Jianchen said calmly. Xiao Zheng chuckled. The Taoist sect of Neptunia was originally located on the Hinyu Plain, and I was born on the Hinyu Plain as well. It's the same place as the Taoist sect of Neptunia. Coupled with the fact that I've already entered it several times and asked around a lot, I know a little more about it. As they spoke, Jianchen's group had already entered the depths of the Neptunian Mountains. Along the way, Jianchen could clearly sense that there were still many powerful presences in the Neptunian Mountains. Clearly, there were still quite a few people who chose to cultivate here. In the end, Jianchen's group chose a hidden cave as their place of seclusion. Master Chanlong cast down a formation to separate them. On one hand, it would serve as a defense, and on the other hand, it would prevent them from interfering with one another. Jianchen immediately entered seclusion. He had already prepared all the resources he needed to break through to the chaotic body. Not only did he have a few Divine King-level monster cores he had obtained from the Yin Mountains of Seven's Despair, but he also had a few crystal cores he had obtained from killing spatial beasts in outer space. These resources were enough for him to successfully break through to the 12th layer of the chaotic body. Kea and Chanlong both entered seclusion as well. Kea healed his wounds first before entering cultivation. He comprehended the mysteries of the world in an attempt to break through to the Divine King level. As for Chanlong, he took out the space ring he had obtained on the 7th floor and checked through its contents. The owner of the space ring was clearly a formations master. Chanlong found many records and comprehensions regarding the laws of formations in the space ring, so he immediately read through them carefully. 500,000 kilometers away from the Neptunian Mountains, the 5th Prince and the others from the Sky Dynasty of the profound Thunder Continent were resting by a small stream at this moment. Amongst the guards that followed them, many of them were covered in blood. Obviously, they'd just experienced a fierce battle not too long ago. The 5th Prince sat on a large piece of rock, holding a fist-sized brown fruit in his hand as he examined it. A faint smile appeared on his face as he murmured, "Dark spirit fruit, the main ingredient for refining the earth spirit purifying pill. This earth spirit purifying pill is a grade 4 divine grade medicinal pill. It has the miraculous effect of cleansing the yuan spirit, removing impurities, and purifying the soul. It is a rare item. Those people really haven't disappointed me. I've obtained quite a few good things from them." The fifth prince had just taken the dark soul fruit from a group of people. Even though the group was not weak, they were still easily wiped out by the people he had brought with him. XIN, the effects of the earth spirit purifying pill are extremely obvious for you right now. It can allow you to approach the heavenly heart realm, allowing you to resonate with the laws of the world as much as possible. It'll be much easier for you to comprehend the mysteries of the world. I will gather all the ingredients for the earth spirit purifying pill in the Azure Poseidon Palace. Once I return, I'll immediately ask the subjects to specially refine the pill for you. The fifth prince held the dark soul fruit in his hand as he turned his head to the side and spoke to Yunqin. His voice was extremely gentle. Yunqin sat on the rock in a daze. Her eyes did not move at all, as if she had become a statue. She did not hear the fifth prince at all. Xana. The fifth prince could not help but raise his voice slightly. Fifth prince, what is it? Only now did Yunqin return to her senses. She looked at the fifth prince in confusion. Xan, look into my eyes, the fifth prince said. He stared at Yunqin without blinking. In the next moment, a gray vortex suddenly appeared in his eyes. It carried with it a mysterious power, as if it wanted to suck in Yunqin's mind. Yunqin immediately became confused. Her entire mind was sucked into the gray vortex in the fifth prince's eyes. She lost herself. Xin, tell me, are you thinking about that person called Jianqin? The fifth prince asked. His voice was very calm, but when it entered Yunqin's ears, it was like a demonic voice that sucked in her mind. Yes, Yunqin replied in a daze. In this state, she could not hide any secrets at all. Everything she said was the truth in her heart. Not far away, Yun Lianqing's expression suddenly changed. He could not help but worry about the safety of Jianqin and the others. However, he knew that there was nothing he could do now. The other people of the Yun family all became stern as well. They were not worried about Jianqin. Instead, they were worried about whether Yun Xian would be affected because of this. The fifth prince's face was gloomy. He had already crushed the god-level material, the dark soul fruit, in his hand. The sticky and fragrant juice covered his entire palm. Yunqin came back to her senses. When she thought of what she had just said, her face instantly turned pale. Although she was absent-minded for a moment just now, she was very clear about what she had said. Yunqin asked herself honestly. When she said miss, she was only thinking about the days she spent with Jianqin and the others. However, Yunqin also knew that the meaning of her miss had changed when the fifth prince heard it. She wanted to explain, but she also knew that if her explanation fell into the ears of others, it would become a cover-up. Let's go. The fifth prince did not dwell on this matter. He called out to the others and set off again. However, he secretly sent a voice transmission to the people behind him. Baiqi, the two of you go with Haya to find that person called Jianqin. Kill anyone who is with Jianqin, including Jianqin. The three of you find an opportunity to leave the group quietly. I don't want Xan to know about this. Bai Qi and Bai He were the two most powerful people in the fifth prince's group, aside from Mr. Shu. They were much stronger than the divine king in the late stage. The fifth prince had sent Bai Qi and Bai He to deal with Jianqin and the others. Clearly, he had also noticed that Jianqin and the others were not ordinary. Chapter 2058. In the blink of an eye, a month had already passed since Jianqin's group had entered the Neptunian mountains. During that month, the Neptunian mountains remained peaceful. It seemed to have become a paradise within the Neptunian Poseidon Palace. The storms of blood that occurred in various parts of the Poseidon Palace did not reach here. Jianqin, Qianlong, Kea, and Xiaozheng all cultivated in seclusion within a hidden cave protected by layers of formations. They did not pay attention to the matters of the outside world. After a month of cultivation, most of the monster cores and crystal cores from the Divine King and space beasts that Jianqin had taken out had been consumed. All the pure and violent energy within them had been refined by Jianqin, turning into the surging chaotic force in his body. Jianqin's chaotic Niden had reached the peak of the 11th layer. He was close to breaking through. It was also at this moment that Jianqin's statue-like body suddenly jolted. The chaotic Niden in his dantian exploded loudly at that moment. Terrifying chaotic force rapidly surged through his body like a wild horse. He had finally broken through to the 11th layer of the chaotic body. He was in the process of consolidating the 12th layer. Jianqin was already familiar with breaking through with the chaotic body. He endured the excruciating pain that felt like thousands of ants gnawing at his bones as he began to condense his chaotic Niden with all his might. At the same time, Kaya sat on the ground in a cave isolated by a formation. The laws of creation, destruction, and fire enveloped her as a barrier of light of different colors. Every single light fused with the world around her, resonating with the laws of the highest order from afar. They seemed to resonate with each other. If other Divine King experts saw the power of laws around Kea right now, they would definitely become extremely shocked. This was because the power of laws that condensed around Kea was extremely dense and pure. Just from this, it was possible to tell that Kea's control and usage of the power of laws had already reached perfection. If all the Divine King experts in the Saints world only had a superficial grasp of laws, Kea had truly grasped the essence. As a result, Kea did not need any cultivation methods or battle skills when fighting against experts of the same level. Just his advantage in laws was enough for him to reign supreme. During the month of seclusion, Kea's comprehension of laws had increased at an extremely obvious rate basically every single day. Moreover, the increase was not limited to just a single law. Instead, the laws of creation, destruction, and fire had increased simultaneously. None of them fell behind. As her comprehension of laws rapidly deepened, an extremely strange thought suddenly appeared in Kea's head. She had a vague feeling that her entire soul had fused with the 3 laws. This was because she felt a sense of intimacy towards the 3 laws from the bottom of her heart. It was just so familiar. However, there seemed to be an invisible, mysterious power that prevented her from connecting with the 3 laws. Whenever she comprehended the laws, the mysterious power that prevented her from connecting with the 3 laws would be diluted sliver by sliver, allowing her grasp over the laws to deepen. She rapidly approached the level of the Divine King. Both Jianqin and Kai benefited from the month of seclusion. Xiaozheng, who was also in seclusion, did not make any progress at all. Compared to Jianqin and Kea, Xiaozheng's talent was rather ordinary. It had taken him almost 100,000 years to reach the early Divine King, so a month of seclusion was naturally nothing to him. As for Master Qianlong, he had read through all the formations left behind by the Primordial Realm expert on the 7th floor of the Azure Poseidon Palace. Even though the Primordial Realm expert had left behind a tremendous amount of information on formations, Qianlong was a prodigy of formations as well. Not only did he read through all the information and experiences in just a month, but he also comprehended and grasped it all. An early Divine King had grasped all the mysteries of formations left behind by an infinite prime in just a month. If news of this made it out, it would be enough to cause a huge uproar. Although this infinite prime is a formations master and has reached an extremely profound level in the way of formations, in my opinion, his understanding of the way of formations is still superficial. If you want to cast down a truly powerful formation that is difficult to get through, you need to possess the power of the laws of formations in addition to the various tools and your own cultivation, Jianqin said. Furthermore, according to my deductions, setting up a formation in the later stage doesn't require the slightest bit of cultivation, nor does it require any formation flags. Just by controlling the power of the natural order of formations, one can set up a great formation with a single thought. Not only are these formations natural, but they also contain the general trend of the world. They are truly perfect without any formation cores or weaknesses. It's just that my comprehension of the laws of formations hasn't reached that level yet, so I can't cast down such a perfect formation, thought Qianlong. Master Qianlong thought. He managed to pick out many flaws from the Infinite Prime's legacy in a single stroke. At this moment, Master Qianlong's eyes lit up. He looked at the Neptunian mountains and thought, according to Xiaozhang, the core formation of the Neptunian mountains was personally cast down by a Grand Exalt. With a Grand Exalt's abilities, his comprehension of formations is naturally incomparable to mine. I wonder if I can observe this formation. If I can comprehend even a tiny bit of it, it'll be an unprecedented, fortuitous encounter for me. Master Qianlong acted as soon as he thought of it. He immediately expanded the senses of his soul and permeated the Neptunian mountains. He proceeded surprisingly smoothly. The senses of his soul, which were not particularly powerful, were actually able to permeate the Neptunian mountains with ease. Master Qianlong could clearly sense the inscriptions of a colossal formation hidden within the rocks of the Neptunian mountains. The inscriptions were extremely dense, spreading out like a spider's web. Every single inscription contained the truths of the world, possessing supreme mysteries of the world. It really is a formation cast down by a Grand Exalt after all. The formations here really are like a vast starry sky, boundless and boundless. Master Qianlong's mind immediately shuddered as he sighed emotionally. Without any hesitation, he sent the power of his soul deeper. Speaking of which, it was quite strange. Even though the Neptunian mountains, the greatest sacred mountain of the Taoist sect of Neptunian, possessed a terrifying, heaven-defying formation, the power of Master Qianlong's soul was like a fish in water. It permeated the true core of the Neptunian mountains effortlessly, without encountering any obstructions along the way. The true core of the Neptunian mountains was a ball of light formed from countless inscriptions. It was only the size of a human head, and it gave off a profound presence. The ball of light seemed like a miniature universe. As it flickered, it constantly evolved the laws of the world, interfering with the space where the Neptunian mountains sat and establishing its own order. Master Qianlong became dazed as he looked at the ball of light before him. Through the ball of light, he seemed to see another world, a world that only belonged to formations. Chapter 2059. Strange. Why does it feel so familiar? I feel like I've seen this formation before, but I've clearly never seen a formation like this before. I've never come into contact with a formation of such a high level in my life either. Master Qianlong was filled with doubt. However, at this moment, the senses of Master Qianlong's soul suddenly lost control and rapidly approached the ball of light. It was as if a terrifying and powerful suction had suddenly appeared from the ball of light, tugging at the senses of Master Qianlong's soul. Even when Master Qianlong resisted with all his might, it was futile. Master Qianlong's face changed drastically. He wanted to sever the senses of his soul immediately. However, as soon as he thought of that, and before he could do anything, the suction from the ball of light locked onto Master Qianlong's soul through the connection of the senses of his soul. In the end, under Master Qianlong's horrified gaze, his soul directly left his body and was sucked into the ball of light. It all happened just too quickly. Master Qianlong did not even have time to think before his soul entered the ball of light formed from the core of the formation. However, to Master Qianlong's surprise, not only did his soul not sense any danger in the core of the formation, but there was instead a warm presence that soothed his uneasiness, gradually calming him down. Master Qianlong did not look at the core of the formation. At that moment, all of his attention was gathered up ahead. A speck of light the size of a pinky finger hovered there, silently. It shone with dazzling, seven-colored light. It was rather enchanting. The speck of seven-colored light seemed to form a wondrous connection with Master Chanlong's soul. So as soon as Master Chanlong appeared in the core of the formation, he locked onto the speck of light through his senses. Afterwards, his soul actually approached the speck of light uncontrollably. This was not something that Master Chanlong did intentionally. Instead, it was completely instinctive, an instinct that originated from the depths of his soul. In the end, Master Chanlong's primordial spirit fused with the rainbow light. Master Chanlong's nascent divinity shuddered. At that moment, it was as if a clap of thunder had exploded in his head, leaving him stunned on the spot. An extremely blurry image also vaguely appeared in his head. The background of the scene was a vast starry sky. Two figures stood in the starry sky, radiating with the light of the way. Both of them gave off a terrifying and boundless aura, causing the entire starry sky to tremble and tremble. The countless stars lost their color, seemingly submitting to the two of them. Even the supreme laws of the way were disturbed, becoming abnormally chaotic. These two figures were so powerful that it made one's heart tremble. They were boundlessly terrifying. They stood at the peak of the starry sky, like the heavenly Tao. They were supreme and controlled the rules of heaven and earth. With a thought, they could interfere with the operation of the universe. With a thought, they could set their own order. They both bathed in the light of the way, obscuring their appearances. One of them had a disk of the way spinning above his head, filling up the entire starry sky and deriving the mysteries of the world. With a thought, he could create a supreme formation that could destroy the universe, shatter space, and change the trajectory of the heavenly Tao. The other person had a heavenly diagram of the 6 paths of samsara behind him. Every single diagram was boundless, like 6 major worlds. Every single world possessed a different power of samsara. When the heavenly diagram of the 6 paths of samsara appeared together, it unleashed terrifying might. It was like a supreme god that suppressed the heavenly Tao of the world. The scene came to a halt. It only appeared for a split second before shattering. Even though it had only appeared for a split second, Chanlong felt like he had been there. It was an extremely great mental blow, and he struggled to calm down for quite some time. Grand exalts. Those two figures must be grand exalts without a doubt. One of the grand exalts should have been the senior who cast down this formation in the Neptunian mountains. The other grand exalt should be the samsaric immortal exalt of the immortals' world. Master Chanlong's soul trembled violently. He was extremely shocked. What exactly is this ball of light that is emitting 7-colored light? Master Chanlong focused his attention on the speck of light. Now that the speck of light had fused with his soul, he knew nothing about it apart from the fact that he could sense that the speck of light posed no threat to him. Moreover, his soul was unable to fuse with the speck of light to peek at the secrets within. It was blocked by the 7-colored light. Suddenly, Master Chanlong's soul shuddered again. He was overjoyed. He discovered that his soul could actually fuse with the core of the formation, as if it had become one with it. He could observe the entire formation with great clarity through the core as a point of contact. At that moment, the colossal formation cast down by grand exalts of the saints' world within the Neptunian mountains no longer held any secrets in Chanlong's eyes. He could observe every single detail of the formation as he wished. Vaguely, he even had the misconception that he could control the power of the entire formation. At the same time, he could control the entire Neptunian mountains. He possessed absolute control over every single inch of the Neptunian mountains. Is the Neptunian mountains a mountain or an arcane treasure? Chanlong was stunned, but soon afterwards he gazed into the distance. Through fusing with the Neptunian mountains, he discovered 3 familiar figures flying into the Neptunian mountains. It's the people beside the 5th prince of the Sky Empire. Chanlong immediately recognized the 3 of them. The three of them were the siblings and Heya who had come under the fifth prince's orders to kill Jianchen's group. Heya was a tall, skinny young man. He seemed ordinary, without anything special about him. However, his cultivation was not weak. He had already reached late Divine King. By he, that kid called Jianchen should be within the Neptunian Mountains. I feel like we're getting closer and closer to them. We should be there soon, Heya said. You could not help but slow down. He began to conceal his presence and moved in a straight line, silently approaching where Jianchen and the others were in seclusion. He glanced back at Bai Qi and Bai He behind him and said softly, "Prepare for battle. We have to complete the mission the fifth prince gave us perfectly. We can't afford to make any mistakes. Although Jianchen's group isn't powerful, and killing them is a piece of cake for us, there are two supreme over-gods among them after all. No one knows whether they're hiding life-saving measures or not. If they manage to escape, we won't be able to answer to the fifth prince. Don't worry. With the two of us taking action, Jianchen's group definitely won't be able to escape. Even if they have life-saving measures, they won't be able to use them in time unless they're also late Divine King," Bai Qi sneered. Chapter 2060. Although the siblings and Heya were still extremely far away from where Jianchen and the others cultivated, Qianlong had already fused with the Neptunian Mountains. With a single thought, he could observe everything that happened in the Neptunian Mountains. Nothing could escape his senses. It felt like the space where the Neptunian Mountains resided had become Qianlong's domain, and Qianlong had become the ruler of the domain. As a result, Qianlong heard every single word of the conversation between the siblings and Heya and the other two people. The three of them have come to kill us. They've come with ill intentions. Master Qianlong thought. With a thought, his soul returned to his original body. The ball of light he had discovered in the core of the formation seemed to stick to his soul, returning to his original body with his soul. Now, Master Qianlong's soul did not need to fuse with the core of the formation. He could vaguely sense that he had established a wondrous connection with the Neptunian Mountains. As long as he remained in the Neptunian Mountains, he could control the formation there at any time. Master Qianlong could not help but become confident as he carefully comprehended the power he possessed. He murmured, "If the old man faced you before, he would only be able to defend passively, but now..." With a flash, Qianlong left the place of seclusion. He sat down on the branch of a large tree outside and waited for the arrival of the Bai siblings leisurely. When Heya entered the depths of the Poseidon, he became slower and slower. A mysterious power permeated the region of the Neptunian Mountains, affecting him to a certain extent. It made his senses towards Jianchen and the others hazy. His innate ability was greatly affected. It really is a formation personally cast down by the Grand Exalt of ancient paths. It actually interferes with my innate ability so greatly. I can only sense 3 out of Jianchen and the others. I can't sense the other one at all," Heya sighed. He became slower and slower, afraid that he would suddenly lose track of Jianchen and the others. After almost half a day, Heya finally stopped somewhere with the siblings. The 3 of them concealed their presences and arrived silently. They did not alarm anyone. "It's here. There's a hidden cave below that is covered by a formation. Jianchen and the others are in there," Heya said as he pointed at an inconspicuous plain. Black Crow pointed at an inconspicuous stone wall below. He then frowned slightly and looked at Bai Qi and Bai He beside him. He said with a strange expression, "However, my innate ability can only sense the existence of 3 of them. The 4th person completely disappeared not long ago. Even now, I can't use my innate ability to find him." "Completely vanished?" Hearing this, Lily raised her eyebrows and chuckled. It can be concluded that the 4 of them should be cultivating in the Neptunian Mountains. That person who completely disappeared couldn't have met with some accident in his cultivation and died, right? That's impossible. Even if he's dead, my innate ability can still find his corpse. Even if his corpse has been reduced to nothingness, My innate ability can still sense where he died, Heya said firmly. Who cares? If you can't find him, then so be it. Let's kill the other 3 quickly and go back to meet up with the 5th prince. Bai Qi took a step forward as he stared at the cave where Jianqin and the others cultivated in with shining eyes. Heavy killing intent flickered. The defenses of this formation are impressive, but in order to prevent the people inside from escaping, we need to get through it in a single strike. Sister, let's attack the formation together. Heya, you stay outside and watch over it. As they spoke, Bai Qi and Lily had already secretly accumulated power. They were prepared to unleash a powerful strike to destroy the formation below. The 3 of you, we have no grievances with you. May I ask why you're trying to kill us? Just as Bai Qi and Bai He were about to make their move, an aged voice suddenly sounded from nearby. The sudden voice shocked Bai Qi, Lily, and Heya. They immediately looked over in the direction of the voice and saw Qianlong seated leisurely on a large tree with a single glance. Their eyes immediately narrowed as they stared at Qianlong. Their hearts were filled with shock. This was because the tree Qianlong sat on was close to the cave. He did not conceal himself at all, yet the 3 of them failed to sense Qianlong's presence at all. Even when they scanned the area with the senses of their souls, there was no one on the tree. Impossible, this is impossible. Hey, you stared at Qianlong in shock as he stammered. His heart churned. To no surprise, the person he had failed to sense with his innate ability earlier was Qianlong. But now, Qianlong was right before him, yet he was still unable to lock onto Qianlong with his innate ability. It was as if Qianlong had fused with the world, truly becoming a part of the world. They could only discover him with the naked eye. Who are you? Bai Qi called out sternly as he became rather stern. Who cares who he is? He's just an early divine king. He probably possesses a treasure or a special secret technique, which is why he can avoid our senses and senses of the soul, Lily said with a deep voice. Bai He, who is filled with a wild nature, spoke in a deep voice. She opened her hand and a red, demonic flower appeared on it, drifting towards Qianlong. The demonic flower swelled with the wind, becoming several dozen meters tall in a single instance. Every single petal was extremely huge, shining with a demonic red light as they enveloped Master Qianlong's head. The huge petals quickly wrapped around Qianlong as if they wanted to wrap around him. In the beginning, the demonic flower was only a seed. It had flown over from outer space and just happened to land before Lily. Lily also knew that the seed was extraordinary. It possessed an extremely powerful life force. So she raised the seed until it sprouted and grew into a beautiful flower. Afterwards, it gradually developed intelligence and grew to its current state by devouring the flesh and blood of cultivators. It was extremely powerful. Once bound by the demonic flower, even late Divine King would not necessarily be able to escape. In the past few years, quite a few Divine King experts had died to the demonic flower. As the demonic flower dealt with Qianlong, Bai Qi, Lily, and Heya all paid close attention. Even though Qianlong was weak, only an early Divine King, he was just too extraordinary right now. He was actually able to escape their senses and make Heya's innate ability useless. Bang! At this moment, the demonic flower that enveloped Qianlong suddenly exploded in the air without any prior signs. The huge demonic flower was reduced to dust in a single instance. The expressions of Bai Qi, Lily, and Heya changed drastically. Their faces were filled with shock. The 3 of them had been paying close attention the entire time, but they failed to sense anything strange at all. What just happened? Heya's voice trembled slightly. He knew exactly how powerful the demonic flower was. It could easily devour many late Divine King experts. Yet it had actually exploded right before his eyes for no apparent reason. Bai Qi and Lily were confused as well. They had no idea what kind of power had killed the demonic flower. However, Lily's face became rather pale. She stared at the demonic flower that had almost fallen as her face was filled with pain. Master Chanlong sat on the tree without moving at all. His eyes shone as his emotions surged. He was unable to contain his excitement. "What have you come here for?" At this moment, a deep voice rang out. Jianqin had passed through the formation and emerged from the cave. He glanced at the demonic flower that had exploded in the air and glared at the three of them. An extremely powerful presence revolved around Jianqin. He was filled with explosive power. Clearly, he had successfully broken through to the 12th layer of the chaotic body.